Dead America. The Portland Gambit Part 2 of 2 by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Day 0 plus 61. Jinx and Zion stood at the counter of the gun store, staring down at the radio that had just informed them they had an hour. 1 hour to figure out how to get out of there before the militia on top of the buildings across the street mounted an assault. Well, the good news is, if they try and get in here, we certainly have the arsenal to make them regret it, Zion said. Jinx thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. They're not going to be doing a raid on the place. So you think Lucas was bluffing? Zion asked. Oh no, there's no bluff. I'd bet every dollar that I have that Lucas is a man of his word. In an hour, if we're here, they're going to take us down, Jinx replied. Zion stood there for a moment, confused. Brother, I just said that. No, you said they were going to raid us, Jinx clarified. Wait, if they're coming after us, but not doing a raid, then what in the hell are they going to do? Zion questioned. They're going to blow open the front of the building, Jinx stated. Zion contemplated the idea for a moment before ultimately shaking his head. They'd be crazy as hell to do that. I mean, it's what I would do, Jinx said. Thank you for proving my point, Zion retorted. Jinx let out a laugh as he playfully flipped Zion off. Why would they do that, though? They'd have to spend more ammo than they'd get out of here just to get it, Zion reasoned. Not if they do what we do. Blow up a couple of houses and wait for them to wander off. Especially if they have an APC. They can park it out front and just wait, Jinx explained. Zion began pacing back and forth in front of the counter. His mind raced through escape plans, all of them immediately shot down in his own mind without speaking. Finally, he realized there was only one course of action. So we take the fight to them. I have every intention of doing so. But before we do that, we have to get the ammo ready for pickup, Jinx responded. What about the drone keeping an eye on us? Zion asked. Just stage it by the ladder. Just before we're about to move, we'll toss it up there. By the time they call us on it, we'll be gone, Jinx instructed. Zion looked Jinx up and down hard, moving side to side to get a better view of him, which confused Jinx. What in the hell are you doing? I'm just trying to figure out where those wings are going to sprout from, Zion said. We're not going up, we're going down, Jinx clarified. Zion let out another sigh, afraid that he knew exactly what Jinx had in mind. We're going into the sewer again, aren't we? Jinx smiled broadly as he reached into the bag of explosives, pulling one out and setting it on the counter. We set this off in the bathroom, and we're blocks away before they know what's going on. I like the not being here part, especially if they intend on blowing the front of the building off. But US scurrying away through the sewers doesn't accomplish our mission. What about the ammo? Zion asked. We're going to carry all we can, Jinx replied. If it's all the same to you, we're not going to report those bullets. If I'm carrying it, I'm keeping it, Zion stated. Jinx cracked a smile as he fist bumped Zion. Oh, no doubt. But how are we getting the rest of the ammo out of here? Zion questioned. Jinx gave him a wink as he picked up the radio. We're going to do a hostage swap. Zion was more confused than ever as Jinx talked into the radio. Hey Birch, do you copy? I read you loud and clear. I have Calvin here too, Birch responded. Good. Are you two safe? Jinx asked. For the moment. Calvin took out one of the gunmen on the roof. And we're pretty sure we riled them up a bit, Birch answered. Jinx looked towards the skylights, which had metal shutters on them. He moved his head around so that he could look through the slots, spotting movement on the rooftops across the street. I'm still seeing movement on the rooftops. Are you sure you pulled some away? I don't know where they came from, but we've spotted a few roaming the neighborhood we're in, Birch replied. These bastards are everywhere, Jinx muttered. Tell them about the boat, Zion reminded. Jinx's shoulders dropped as he nodded. Oh, and they took the boat. So if you see a drone, it's not ours. There was a long pause on the radio before a response came. Do you have any more good news for me, Jinx? Birch asked. Jinx started chuckling as the thought about what he was about to say flowed through his mind. As a matter of fact, I do. How do you guys feel about stealing that APC? Again, there was a long pause on the radio, as if Birch was having a minor aneurysm and it was taking a moment for him to recover. Is there any particular reason, or are you just going for shits and giggles at this point? Oh, there's a reason. Right now they hold all the cards. If we can take away their transportation, their guys are going to be stranded, which will make them a lot more open to some hostage negotiations, Jinx explained. Unless they have a second APC, Birch pointed out. Thank you, Captain Buzzkill, Jinx retorted. Oh, I'm a captain now? Nothing like a little battlefield promotion, Birch replied. Jinx let out a chuckle, doing what he could to keep his spirits up as he continued. So, do you think you can get to the APC? Yeah, it's going to take some doing, but I'll get to it, Birch confirmed. Good. Now you only have 55 minutes, Jinx reminded. Jesus Christ, Jinx, are you trying to kill me? Birch exclaimed. Nope, not trying. It just comes naturally, Jinx quipped. Where the hell did you pull that number from? Birch asked. I talked to their team leader, Lucas. He's taking a lunch break on the boat and gave us an hour to figure out our surrender terms, Jinx explained. He seems reasonable, Birch commented. Yep, that's why I'm banking on him being willing to negotiate for the release of his men. Now, can you do it in under an hour? Jinx asked. We're going to find out, Birch answered. Outstanding. Get to it, Jinx urged. Wait, Birch interjected. What is it? Jinx asked. What are you two going to do? Birch inquired. I'm going to do what I always do. Blow shit up, Jinx declared. Birch let out an audible laugh over the radio. Never change, Jinx. Never change. Get in touch when you have something, Jinx instructed. Copy that, Birch responded. The radio fell silent as Jinx turned back to Zion. What do you need me to do? Just keep working on bagging up the ammo. I'm going to get our bags packed and the weapons ready to go. Anything in particular you want? Jinx asked. I ain't that great of a shot, Zion admitted. How about a shotgun then? Jinx suggested. Just as long as I can sling it over my shoulder, Zion agreed. I got you covered. Now come on. We got work to do, Jinx said. As Jinx and Zion prepared for their escape, Birch and Calvin hunkered down in a house less than a mile away from them. Birch positioned himself beside the front window, looking out into the neighborhood. There were several zombies roaming around, shambling after nothing in particular. Inside one of the houses across the street, Birch could see movement. Fast, deliberate movement as a trio of militiamen rushed through the dwelling, trying to find Birch and Calvin. How are we looking out there? Calvin asked as he walked back into the living room from the kitchen, carrying a couple of bottles of water, handing one over to Birch. They're making quick work of the neighborhood. It's not going to be long before they find us, Birch replied, taking a sip of the water, shaking his head at the unpleasant room temperature of it. I'd give some real money for a refrigerator. I tell you what, when we get back home, I got a net with your name on it. Fill it up and toss it in the river. It'll be colder than a well digger's ass before you know it, Calvin said. That sounds perfect. Well, almost perfect. I'd kill for a cold beer, Birch responded. I can't get you beer, but I do have my uncle's moonshine recipe I can break out, Calvin offered. I always knew you were my favorite, Calvin, Birch said with a smile. Calvin cracked a smile as he took a seat on the other side of the window. He looked out at the street, seeing the activity in the neighborhood. So how are we doing this? Your guess is as good as mine, Birch replied. I can distract them again if you want to make a run for the APC, Calvin suggested. Even if I could get there, I have no idea how to get into it. With as many of those things that were caught up on the rebar, I don't think I could get past them, Birch explained. Can't you just go in through the back hatch? Calvin asked. Birch shook his head no. With the way they have that thing modified, I don't think the back hatch would even open. They were definitely going in through the top hatch. So just do that then, Calvin suggested. How do I get up there, though? If I start trying to climb it, I'm going to get eaten. And if I don't, the noise those things make is going to get me shot, Birch reasoned. Just don't climb then, Calvin proposed. Birch gave Calvin a perplexed look. And how do you propose I do that? Jump, Calvin said. Birch initially let out a sigh in response to the idea. However, his disdain for it quickly faded once he thought about it some more. Wait, there was another building beside it, wasn't there? Yep, 2 stories. It would be a bit of a jump from the window, but I think you could make it, Calvin confirmed. Birch contemplated it for a moment before responding. That's a hell of a risk, but I think I can do it. Good deal. Now we just have to get you over to it, Calvin said. Both men were startled as a gunshot went off across the street. They turned their attention to the window, looking across the street to see the 3 militiamen stepping out from the house. One of the men raised his handgun, shooting another zombie in the face as it lumbered towards them. Their leader pointed to the house right next door to them before pointing across the street. Calvin and Birch held their breath as all 3 of them stayed on that side of the street, focusing their attention on the next house. I think they're coming our way next, Birch whispered. Which means you need to get a move on, Calvin urged. What about you? Birch asked. I'm going to stay here and ambush them when they come out, Calvin replied. Birch thought about it for a moment before shaking his head against the plan. That's just going to leave you trapped in here. I'll manage, Calvin insisted. Birch sat there, contemplating the situation for a moment before getting a grin on his face. I got a better idea. What are we doing? Calvin asked. The longer we keep this fight going, the more of those things that are going to come our way. If we can keep them pinned down, they might just get stranded, Birch explained. How do we play it? Calvin asked. I'm going to get up the block a ways. When they come out, I'm going to hit them. And when they start coming after me, you shoot to wound, Birch outlined. I can handle that, Calvin agreed. Good, because once we got them trapped, I need you to move up to where you were before. I hope I don't need cover, but if I do. Birch trailed off and Calvin picked right up where he left off. Then you'll want your heavily armed guardian angel waiting in the wings, Calvin finished. Yeah, something like that, Birch said. Calvin immediately nodded in agreement before extending his fist for a bump. Let's get it done then. Chapter 2. Birch rushed to the back door of the house, quickly checking the backyard to ensure it was empty before exiting. Get up to the next block, move your ass, he muttered to himself. He got himself into gear, pumping his legs hard as he ran through the backyards of the houses towards the next block. As he ran, the lingering thought of what if there are other militiamen waiting for me kept creeping into his mind. As soon as it arrived, he shook it out of his mind. If you're ambushed, at least you won't live long enough to kick yourself, he whispered. Birch stopped at the last house on the block, looking both ways down the street before crossing. While the traffic was considerably lighter than it was in the pre-war days, there was still quite the crowd. To his left, across the street from where Calvin was laying in wait, he spotted a pack of ghouls. More than enough to overwhelm a group of militiamen, especially if they were busy tending to their wounded. Perfect. It's about time we had something go our way, he remarked. Birch broke from cover, bounding across the road, completely unconcerned with the noise his boots made on the pavement. He hustled down a couple more houses before stopping. He checked his surroundings, relieved that there was nothing in the immediate vicinity. He could hear some movement coming from the next yard, but at the moment it wasn't a threat. Walking down the grass between 2 houses, he pulled out his assault rifle. Popping out the magazine, ensuring that it was filled to the brim with bullets, he readied himself for battle. All right, Calvin, you better be on your game, because when I start firing, I'm going to get real popular real quick, he muttered to himself. Birch stayed behind cover, peeking one eye out from around the corner of the house. As he waited for the militia to step out of the house, he could hear the moaning beginning to intensify around him. He looked over his shoulder towards the backyard of the house, spotting 4 ghouls shambling around it. They were a good 15 yards away, but he knew that could change quickly as soon as they noticed him. He didn't have to wait long for that to happen, as one of the zombies let out an excited moan as it spotted him. "Come on, assholes, you know we're not in that house," he growled. Birch kept his attention trained on the house the militiamen were in. However, he looked back over his shoulder every couple of seconds, keeping track of the ghouls coming towards him. Another tense few moments went by as the zombies closed in. Birch thought about drawing his knife to dispatch them, but knew if his timing was off, Calvin could get overwhelmed by the militia if he wasn't there to draw their attention. "Oh, to hell with it," he muttered. Birch spun around, taking quick aim with his assault rifle and squeezing the trigger. His first shot blew out the back of the head of the lead ghoul, sending it to the ground in a heap. The rest of the pack was easy to pick off due to them being so close together. In a matter of seconds, all 4 had been eliminated. Birch turned around quickly, raising his rifle and aiming it towards the target house. Before he could even look through the sights, bullets flew his way. Several of them missed, whizzing by his head, while a couple impacted the brick, sending chunks of it through the air and forcing him behind cover. Birch let out a scream as he popped out from behind cover, squeezing the trigger rapidly towards the trio of militiamen who were moving in his direction. The leader of their pack was a good 10 yards ahead of the other 2, who were flanking him on either side and following behind. The trio of militia were running up the grass, using the trees as cover. Birch continued to fire, all of his shots drawing nothing but air, but nonetheless succeeding in their purpose. "Any time now, Calvin," he shouted. Birch fired a few more times at the lead militiaman, forcing him to take cover beside a large tree in the front yard of the house directly across from Calvin. As he was reloading, a round hit him in the kneecap. There was a grisly spray of bone and blood as the man dropped his weapon and fell to the ground. As his 2 partners looked around, trying to figure out where the shot came from, Birch stepped back out from cover and fired several more times. The 2 militiamen snapped back into attack mode, sending a barrage of bullets in his direction. Birch ducked back behind cover for a moment before setting up to return fire. He didn't squeeze the trigger, however, as he saw that the mob of creatures were making their presence known. While Birch couldn't hear exactly what was being said, he could see the leader of the group calling back to his men for help. Both of the still-standing militiamen fired several rounds towards the encroaching mob, putting a few of them down as they moved up to their fallen comrade. "Be smart, Calvin. Don't fire at them," he muttered. Birch held his breath as he watched the militiamen grab their fallen friend while firing towards the mob. They attempted to retreat, only for the wounded man to fall back to the ground. They stood there for a moment, attempting to figure out where to go. Finally, they decided that their only play was to get into a house. One of the militiamen broke from his partners, going straight towards the front door of the nearest house and getting the front door open. While he was working on that, the other 2 hobbled towards the dwelling, while firing bullets behind them as the mob continued to shamble their way. Birch watched with satisfaction as the trio of men got into the house, and the mob of zombies quickly surrounded it. "That should keep them busy," he said to himself. Birch took off running towards the back of the house, popping out the mostly used magazine and putting in a fresh one. He knew there was a fight ahead of him, and he wanted to be ready for it. Meanwhile, Calvin sat in the house, looking out through the broken window his bullet had created. He remained out of sight, not wanting to draw any attention to himself. From his vantage point, he could see the zombies swarming around the house across the street, as well as the still-standing militiamen doing what they could to fortify their positions. While he couldn't see the entirety of the house, the front curtains were open. Calvin watched as 2 men grabbed a heavy bookcase and hastily dragged it across the floor to reinforce the door. "Well, son of a bitch, it doesn't look like they're planning on going anywhere quick," he muttered. Calvin looked through his scope to get a better look through the window. While he couldn't see much, he did spot the man he shot on the couch. The lower portion of his bloody leg was barely hanging on by a thread, and he was doing everything he could to stop the bleeding. Calvin put his rifle down right after one of the militiamen pulled the curtain shut. "For what it's worth, buddy, I hope you keep the leg," he said quietly. Calvin moved back away from the window, taking a seat on the couch to gather himself. "Okay, Calvin, you gotta get moving here. Birch is going to need your help," he told himself. Calvin pulled himself off the couch, slinging the rifle over his shoulder and pulling out a knife. As he approached the back door, he could hear moaning coming from the backyard. He moved up to the door, looking out and seeing two creatures shambling about, wandering towards him from the neighboring yard. "Oh, come on, you undead critters. Don't you hear your friends across the street?" he muttered. Calvin held his breath, plotting his attack as the ghouls moved closer and closer to him. However, before he stepped out to strike, gunshots went off across the street. The zombies weren't the only ones who were drawn by the noise. Calvin rushed back to the front living room, taking up a position by the window. What in the hell is going on over there? He wondered aloud. Calvin looked out across the street, seeing that the mob of creatures had managed to force their way in through the front door, which was wide open. With the curtains pulled, Calvin couldn't see what was happening inside the living room. However, there was a lot of what sounded like panic fire moving deeper into the single-story house. A few more shots popped off, which did nothing to stem the tide of ghouls flowing in through the front door. With one more shot, the guns fell silent. "For your sake, boys, I hope you're hiding in a bedroom." "Either that, or I hope you just used that last shot on yourselves," Calvin said grimly. He shook his head at the thought before pushing it out of his mind. Snapping back into the moment, he made his way to the back door again, letting a smile creep onto his face as he noticed nothing in the backyard. Calvin stepped out into the yard, still looking around to make sure he was alone. He shuddered a bit as he heard the chorus of moans coming from across the street. While a lot of them were muffled by virtue of being inside the house, it was still loud enough to reach him. He worked his way down the blocks, staying to the yards to keep his noise to a minimum. If it wasn't for the stench of death in the air and the constant threat of being shot by a bunch of assholes, this would be a nice walk. Calvin chuckled to himself, amused by his own quip, as he continued on down the street. It took a few minutes before he got into position at the house across the street from his target. Calvin pulled out his rifle, aiming it towards the rooftops in the downtown area. From his vantage point, he could only see one man who was standing firmly at the back of the building and looking in his direction. While he was too far away to be spotted by the naked eye, Calvin knew the militiaman was going to be trouble. "Looks like I'm going to have to backtrack," Calvin muttered to himself. He let out a sigh before retreating a block and crossing over the road. He waited until he couldn't see the rooftop of the building due to the trees before making his run. After working his way back down towards the target house, he stopped at the last block before it, looking towards the militiaman. Calvin didn't need his scope to see that the man was scanning the area with his binoculars. "Time it right, Calvin. You got this, boy," he whispered, psyching himself up before breaking from cover as the man looked in the other direction. He pumped his legs hard, getting across the street and back behind cover before the man looked back. Calvin pinned himself against the back of a house, too afraid to look back towards downtown. "Well, if he didn't shoot at you, then there's a good chance he didn't see you. Now get moving," he encouraged himself. Calvin talked himself into it, getting out from cover and rushing over to the target house. He drew his knife before entering, as the back door was still wide open. After a few moments of standing in the kitchen and not hearing anything moving or moaning, he relaxed a bit. "Okay, I made it. Now I just have to wait on Birch to make his move." Chapter 3. Lucas sat in a comfortable deck chair on the bow of the boat. In his lap was a mid-sized pouch containing a hot mixture of pasta and sauce. Even though it was an MRE, he savored every bite of the hot food, knowing it was becoming more scarce as the days went on. He took a bite before looking back to the side of the boat, where his two prisoners sat. Private Simmons sat with his legs dangling over the side of the boat, nursing his hand wound, which was bundled up in a white bandage. Beside him was Corporal Parker, sitting with his back to the railing and his legs stretched out. While he wasn't injured, he was clearly perturbed about the situation. Despite being several yards away, Lucas could see the displeasure on his face. "Is something troubling you, Corporal?" Lucas asked. Parker shook his head lightly while shrugging his shoulders. "Nothing is troubling me at all. I'm just enjoying a day out here in nature." Despite the upbeat message, Parker's tone was dripping with venom. Lucas chuckled to himself as he took another bite of his food. "You don't like me very much, do you, Corporal?" "I can't say that I do, man," Parker replied. "And why is that exactly? Is it because your friend there is injured?" Lucas inquired. "Simmons here?" "No. He kind of brought that one on himself. Isn't that right, Simmons?" Parker said. Simmons didn't respond, instead just letting out a defeated sigh. Yep, I bet you next time when I say stand down, you're going to do as ordered, aren't you? Parker gave his friend a pat on the back, or as much of one that he could with his hands bound together with zip ties. I like your style of command there, Parker. Reminds me of myself if I'm being honest, Lucas remarked. Parker grimaced, forcing the words he really wanted to say to stay down. However, a little of that venom seeped out. You and I are nothing alike. Lucas took another bite of food as he got up from his seat and walked back towards the corporal, taking a knee just a few feet away. Oh, that's not true. As much as you might loathe to admit it, you and I are cut from the same cloth. Lucas put down what was left of his food before rolling up his sleeve. Parker's eyes got wide when he saw the scars on Lucas's arm, which went from the palm of his hand and past his elbow before vanishing behind the top part of the sleeve. I picked this beauty mark up over in the sandbox. I don't remember a lot after the explosion went off, but when I came to, I could see there wasn't a lot left of my arm. But thanks to the hard work of a few very talented doctors, I still have full use of my arm and enough metal in there to set off every metal detector in a 5-block radius. Parker stared at the wound for another few moments before nodding. You left a part of yourself over in the sandbox. I can respect that. But that's where our similarities end. Today, you and I are nothing alike. Lucas smirked as he took a seat, leaning against the wall of the boat and stretching his legs out beside Parker. He grabbed a full forkful of pasta before continuing. You and I are exactly alike, whether you want to admit it or not. Bullshit. I'm fighting for my country, and you're out here fighting for glory or money, or whatever it is you militia types are all about, Parker retorted. Lucas sat there for a few seconds before breaking into laughter. It took him several moments to gather himself again. Oh, that's a good one, Corporal. We're in a war, so there's no glory to be found. And we're in the apocalypse, so money is worthless. No, Corporal, at this point you and I are the exact same. We're out here risking our lives and the lives of our men to help our communities survive another day. Parker was initially ready to resist the words coming out of Lucas's mouth, but as he listened, the words began to resonate. You and I have another thing in common, Corporal. I don't want to be out here any more than you do. And I certainly don't want to take the lives of my fellow brothers in arms. I'm going to call bullshit on that. You've been trying to kill my friends all day long, Parker said. Make no mistake, Corporal, I will kill whoever I must to succeed in my mission. Because by doing my job, I help ensure that the people who entrusted their safety to me are as safe as they can possibly be. When you and your friends cut and ran, my friends and I stepped up to do the job that you didn't, Lucas replied. Before Parker could respond, one of Lucas's men came up to him. Sorry to interrupt, sir, but I have a call that you need to take. Lucas grabbed the radio as he stood up. He glanced into his MRE pouch, seeing that there was still a quarter of his meal left. Corporal, when's the last time you had a hot meal? About a week or so. At least I think that's the case. The days all seem to run together now, Parker answered. Believe me, I understand that feeling all too well, Lucas said, handing the pouch of pasta down to Parker. It took him a moment to accept it, but he finally did and immediately dove into the food. Lucas walked back up towards the front of the boat, getting out of earshot of the soldiers before talking into the radio. This is Lucas. What's the situation? One of the militiamen, Johnny, spoke in an excited, almost panicked tone. This is Johnny. Matt's hit pretty bad, nearly took his leg clean off. We're trapped in a house about a mile east of downtown. There's 100 of those things around us. Okay, Johnny, I'm going to need you to calm down there. Who else is with you? Lucas asked. It's just me, Matt, and Simon, Johnny replied. Lucas contemplated for a moment, realizing that out of the three of them, only Matt had a military background. He knew that while the other two men were capable, they wouldn't be in a situation like this. Okay, Johnny, I want you to listen to me. What room are you in? The bedroom, Johnny said. Okay, are you at the end of a hallway? Lucas asked. No, we're in the middle of the hallway, back bedroom. I remembered what you taught us, Johnny answered. That's good, Johnny. If you're in the middle bedroom, then those things aren't going to be able to get enough weight on the door to break it down, Lucas reassured. We have a dresser dragged over in front of it, and we have a bookcase laying up against that," Johnny added. "Okay, Johnny, that sounds like you have things under control," Lucas said. "But what are we going to do?" Johnny asked, his voice filled with concern. "You're going to sit tight for a little bit, and I'm going to have someone come and get you. Now, I need to know, how is Matt doing?" Lucas inquired. "He's in a hell of a lot of pain, but Simon managed to get the bleeding stopped," Johnny reported. "Okay, that's good. You just keep him awake and alert, and we'll have someone over to you soon," Lucas instructed. "Okay, thanks, Lucas. And I'm sorry," Johnny said. "Sorry for what, Johnny?" Lucas asked, puzzled. "Just for, getting trapped and all," Johnny explained. "You have nothing to apologize for, Johnny. You weren't the one who got shot, but you were the one who got him to safety. Now sit tight and don't worry about it," Lucas reassured him. "Thank you, Lucas," Johnny said, his voice tinged with relief. Lucas put down the radio, motioning for one of the other militiamen to come over to him. "Yes, sir," the militiaman responded. "Have that drone pilot. What's his name?" Lucas trailed off. "Dave," the militiaman supplied. "Yeah, have Dave fly to the east of downtown into the neighborhood. I need eyes on a house about a mile out that's surrounded by those things," Lucas ordered. "I'm on it, sir," the militiaman confirmed. Lucas stood on the bow of the ship, gathering himself before changing the channel on the radio. "Hey, Jinx, old buddy, are you there?" There was a long pause on the radio before a voice came back over. "Either you're a fast eater or my watch is fast, because I'd swear I have another 15 minutes. I do apologize for cutting things short. I fully intended to give you your hour. However, something has come up that requires my full attention. So I'm afraid we're going to have to move forward right now," Lucas explained. "I'm afraid that I don't have an answer for you just yet," Jinx replied. "Then I have no choice but to make the decision for you. Now, I strive to be a man of my word, so I will give you the last 14 minutes and change on your hour. However, as soon as that time is up, my men are going to take that gun store by force," Lucas stated firmly. "You're more than welcome to try," Jinx said with bravado. "While I appreciate the bravado, and may or may not have been guilty of doing the same thing over the years, I implore you to escape while you have the time. Take whatever you can carry. I have no problem with that. I guarantee you safe passage over the rooftop if you need to make your way back the way you came. As long as you don't fire, we won't," Lucas offered. "I appreciate the offer, Lucas, and I might take you up on it. I guess we'll find out in 13 minutes or so," Jinx replied. "I hope that you choose wisely, Jinx," Lucas said, as the line went dead. Lucas tossed the radio down onto the chair on the deck. He stood there for a moment in the brisk air before pacing back and forth, as if something was bothering him. "Something on your mind, Lucas?" Parker asked. "May I ask you something?" Lucas inquired. "It's your party," Parker replied. "How well do you know this Corporal Jinx?" Lucas asked. "Just met him today. In fact, you've talked to him more than I have." "But he has a reputation," Parker answered. "A reputation? What kind?" Lucas pressed. "He's one of the craziest sons of bitches to ever put on the uniform," Parker explained. "I've heard that about a lot of guys over the years," Lucas remarked. "Except this time, it's true. Do you know what his job was during the invasion of Seattle?" Parker asked. "Do tell," Lucas prompted. "His team were the first boots on the ground on the southern flank. Literally ran a boat on shore and jumped out. Tens of thousands of those things around, and it was his job to distract them. He leveled half a small town so that our troops could have a landing site that was free of those things," Parker explained. "So I shouldn't underestimate him?" Lucas asked. "I wouldn't," Parker advised. Lucas nodded in appreciation to Parker before changing the channel on the radio. "Roof team, do you copy?" "We're standing by," the militiaman responded. "I have given the men inside the gun store a free pass across the rooftops, as long as they don't raise their weapons towards you," Lucas instructed. "Understood," the militiaman confirmed. "One more thing. Be on alert. Lucas added. For what exactly? The militiaman asked, confused. I don't know exactly, but based on the information I have, expect it to come out of left field. Chapter 4. Jinx stood at the counter, looking down at the assortment of weapons and ammunition he had gathered over the last hour. Multiple high-end scoped assault rifles, shotguns, and multiple bags of ammunition for each were laid out in front of him. As he stood and stared, deep in thought, Zion came in from the back room, immediately noticing Jinx in a bit of a daze. Yo man, are we on break or something? Zion asked. Jinx shook his head violently, as if waking himself from a deep slumber. He immediately snapped back into the moment. We're on the clock. Yeah, no shit. We've been on the clock, Zion replied. No, I mean we're really on the clock. We have just over 10 minutes before they make their move. Damn it. Okay, call it out. What am I doing? Zion asked, urgency in his voice. Jinx thought about it for a moment, the expression on his face revealing the conflicting ideas fighting for dominance in his mind. Jinx, call it out, brother. The only wrong answer is doing nothing, Zion urged. Jinx nodded, thankful for that little extra push that Zion had provided for him. Get up to the roof. If you don't see the drone in the sky, I want you to start putting the ammo bags up top. And if I do see the drone? Zion inquired. Jinx thought about it for a moment before shrugging. What the hell, just put them up there anyway. I'm on it, Zion confirmed. Jinx grabbed the radio, quickly changing the channel and speaking forcefully into it. Birch, what's your 20? I'm at the house just across from the building I need to get into. I see a lot of movement in there, so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pull it off, Birch responded. Well, you have 9 minutes to figure it out and get that APC, or else Zion and I are probably going to be dead, Jinx stated. There was a long pause on the radio before Birch spoke up in a sarcastic manner. Well, damn, Jinx, don't put any pressure on me or anything. I'm not trying to put pressure on you, man. I'm just telling you what the situation is. And in 9 minutes, they're going to make a move on this gun store unless we give them a reason not to. And you're that reason, Jinx explained. Copy that. Are you two getting out? Birch asked. Yeah, we're going to try. But if that escape plan doesn't work, we're going to be in a bad situation, Jinx replied. Okay, I'm making the move now, Birch confirmed. The line went dead as Jinx hopped over the counter, walking with purpose towards the bathroom. As he entered, he turned his focus towards the floor. Come on, where are you hiding, Drain? You gotta be somewhere. It took him a moment before spotting a drain pipe tucked away in the corner of a stall. There you are. Jinx pulled out one of the explosive devices from the bag, checking his watch before punching in the numbers on the timer. Okay, 7.5 minutes. Let's get a move on. Jinx rushed back out into the store, hurrying down to the back room where the ladder was. Just as he entered, Zion's feet hit the floor, startling him. How are we looking? I was about to ask you the same thing, Zion replied. Got the bomb set. We'll have a 30-second window from the time it goes off to when they're going to be coming through the front door. Now, what about the roof? Jinx asked. There's no drone in the sky, and we're slightly higher up than the buildings across the street, so I don't think they can see me tossing the bags out onto the roof, Zion explained. Jinx looked to the ground, seeing that there were only 8 bags left. Where are the rest of the bags? I thought we had 50. 56. And they're on the roof already, Zion corrected. How in the holy hell did you do that? Jinx asked, astonished. Zion smirked as he reached down and grabbed 4 bags, each one weighing around 50 pounds. He slung them onto his shoulders before beginning the climb to the roof. All Jinx could do was stand there and watch in amazement, muttering to himself, I really need him to get me on a lifting regiment. Over the next few minutes, Zion finished getting the bags of ammunition in place on the rooftop, while Jinx gathered up their treasure trove of weaponry, positioning it near the bathroom. Jinx stared at the radio, hoping it would come to life with Birch's voice. He desperately wanted to call for an update, but knew that doing so could potentially put his friend in danger if he was sneaking around. That's the last of it, How are we doing on time? Zion asked. 60 seconds until showtime, Jinx replied. Any word from Birch? Zion inquired. Not yet, Jinx responded. So what happens if there's not a sewer underneath that floor? Zion questioned. Jinx didn't respond verbally. Instead, he just pointed down to the stack of guns resting against the wall beside them. How many of those bombs do you have left? Zion asked. 3, Jinx answered. If this goes south and the front of the building goes, hit the timer on all 3 of those so we can go out in a blaze of glory, Zion suggested. Or we could climb up top and chuck them over to the guys who took us down, Jinx countered. With all due respect, brother, I've been shot before. I'd much rather go out being blown up than shot, Zion replied. Jinx let out a chuckle, exchanging a fist bump and nod with Zion. As they enjoyed their brief moment of levity, Jinx's watch began to beep. 10 seconds. Here we go. Both Zion and Jinx backed away further from the bathroom, taking refuge behind the counter. Jinx stared at his watch as it counted down. As the counter hit 0, there was a deafening sound that resonated through the room. The front shutters rattled, the glass shattering behind them. Zion and Jinx pulled themselves up off the ground, struggling to deal with the intense ringing in their ears. They attempted to speak to each other, but all they could hear was the ringing. It took a moment for it to subside, and when it did, the first thing they heard was gunshots going off from outside. Come on, let's go see if we're lucky, Jinx said. The 2 men grabbed their weapons and ammunition bags, slinging them over their shoulders as they rushed towards the bathroom, or what was left of it. As they stepped through the door, they saw the entire room obliterated. The stalls and toilets were in 1,000 pieces, and there was an 8-foot-wide hole in the floor that led down into the ground. Jinx walked over, grabbing his flashlight and shining it down, revealing the sewer below. We're in business. Come on, Jinx urged. As their boots splashed down into the sewer below, Jinx aimed his flashlight around, trying to get his bearings. I think if we go down this way, it should take us to the west side of town. What's over there? Zion asked. Jinx could hear gunshots popping off from the rooftops outside. He motioned towards them as he spoke, hopefully none of that. What the hell are they shooting at anyway? Surely they couldn't see us through the shutters, Zion speculated. Either they're taking target practice on zombies. Jinx's voice trailed off as Zion caught onto his line of thinking. Or Birch and Calvin are out there causing them some trouble, Zion finished. I know what I'm putting my money on, Jinx said with a grin. Zion couldn't help but crack a smile, knowing that his friend Calvin was taking it to them. His smile only lasted a moment, however, as they heard an unsettling noise coming from above them. What in the hell is that? Zion asked, concerned. Jinx aimed the flashlight up, letting out some barely audible curses as he studied the concrete above them. I don't think I like your tone, brother. And I don't like the way that's looking, Jinx replied, pointing to the concrete above them, which was developing some significant cracking. He held the light there, and the 2 of them could see the concrete continuing to separate. I'm no structural engineer, but that doesn't look right, Zion observed. Run, Jinx shouted. Both men took off running down the sewer, splashing through the pungent water as they went. As they moved, they could hear the concrete above them continuing to break apart, chunks of it splashing down behind them. As the 2 of them pumped their legs, the noise behind them continued to intensify. Jinx kept alternating the position of his flashlight, shining it up towards the ceiling and ahead so that he would see where he was going. After 50 yards, Jinx slowed down, prompting Zion to push him in the back. Come on, man, we gotta keep moving. Jinx aimed the flashlight up towards the concrete above. It's solid, we're good. The 2 of them turned around, watching as a portion of the sewer collapsed in on itself. The tight confines quickly filled with dust and debris, momentarily blinding the duo. As the dust began to settle, their attention was snapped towards the sound emanating from the collapse. While it was difficult to hear initially, they quickly realized that it was moaning. Jinx stepped in front of Zion, aiming his brand new scoped assault rifle down the sewer. With one hand on the trigger, he handed the flashlight over to Zion, who immediately aimed it towards the collapse. Holy shit, Jinx exclaimed. Jinx immediately squeezed off several shots as he saw a couple of dozen zombies picking themselves up off the ground. His aim was true, striking several ghouls in the head and dropping them back down. The noise, however, attracted attention from above, and within seconds, zombies were falling in through the opening on the street. Dozens of them fell onto their brethren, creating a pile of writhing, rotting flesh on the sewer base. "We gotta move, man," Zion urged. Jinx slung the rifle back over his shoulder before taking the flashlight and drawing his handgun. "Stay on my ass, we're going to be moving fast. There's bound to be a lot of dead ends down here, and I'll be damned if we're going to get stuck in one." "I'm following you, brother," Zion confirmed. Jinx led the duo down the sewer line, getting to an intersection about 100 yards up from the collapse. He aimed the flashlight in both directions, seeing the sewer line stretching on far beyond the light. Jinx went deep into thought, as if he was trying to draw a map of the town in his mind. As he focused, Zion turned around as he heard moans coming from behind them. "We're gonna have to get moving here, Jinx," Zion said. Jinx held up a single finger, indicating that he needed another moment. After some more thought and a defeated sigh, he smacked Zion on the arm. "We're going to the right." "Are you sure?" Zion asked. "I'm pretty sure left would take us south towards the edge of town," Jinx explained. "Getting out of town might be a good idea," Zion suggested. "Unless we run into a mob of those things from the parking lots in the fields," Jinx countered. Zion thought about it for a moment before shaking his head in frustration. "Okay, to the right it is." Jinx and Zion broke from their position, rushing through the sewer towards an unknown destination as the moaning behind them continued to intensify. Chapter 5. Birch stared down at his radio as Jinx's voice came through loud and clear. "I'm not trying to put pressure on you, man," Jinx said. "I'm just telling you what the situation is. And in 9 minutes, they're going to make a move on this gun store unless we give them a reason not to. And you're that reason." "Copy that. Are you two getting out?" Birch replied. "Yeah, we're going to try. But if that escape plan doesn't work, we're going to be in a bad situation." "Okay, I'm making the move now." Birch pocketed the radio and looked out the bedroom window from his position toward the target 2-story building on the edge of downtown. There was about a 100-yard run across an open lot before he'd reached the building. Despite the noise being made by the mob of creatures in downtown, there were still a few dozen of them milling about in the field. Birch stared intently at the 2-story building, which was an old-style office. Numerous windows dotted the brick facade, but his attention was honed in on the front door, which was being pushed open by a ghoul coming outside. "Well, at least getting in there should be easy," Birch muttered to himself. He pulled out a flashlight, giving it a thorough check before grabbing his knife. While he anticipated a mob of ghouls inside the building, he knew that if he fired a gun, he'd run the risk of the militiamen on the rooftops discovering him. "There's nothing to it, Birch," he said, trying to psych himself up. "Just sprint past dozens of those things, break into a darkened building filled with ghouls that want to eat you, get up to the 2nd floor, jump out the window onto a heavily fortified vehicle, get inside, and drive off before you get sniped from the rooftop." Birch let out a horror laugh as he shook his head. "Next time, I'm going to the gun store." Glancing down at his watch, he saw he had less than 8 minutes to get it done. He immediately broke from cover, striding through the house before throwing open the back door. Birch picked up speed as he darted across the backyard, wanting as much momentum as he could build before getting to the open field. Almost immediately, several creatures took notice of him and began shambling in his direction. Their moans were like a clarion call to their comrades, garnering their attention and pulling them toward the fresh meat. Birch paid them no mind as he darted around the first wave of them, their outstretched hands grasping nothing but air as he blew by them. As he approached the next grouping of them, he was forced to lower his shoulder and plow through them, sending several of them sprawling to the ground. He reached a clearing halfway across the field, no zombies within 10 yards of him. However, the mob of creatures between him and the building was beginning to solidify as ghouls from across the field converged on his location. "Damn it, now what?" he muttered under his breath. Birch looked past the horde toward the door, seeing that creatures were beginning to shamble outside in greater numbers, drawn to the noise. With that entry point becoming less and less viable by the second, he turned his attention toward the windows on the far side of the building. A couple of dozen zombies were on the fringes of the growing horde, but they were still spread out enough that he could push through them. At least he hoped that he could. There's no turning back now. Get moving, he urged himself. Birch let out a huff as he began pumping his legs hard again, moving toward the right flank of the horde. Within seconds, he reached the front edge of the creatures, lowering his shoulder and plowing through a couple of them. As he got to the second level, one of the ghouls managed to reach out and grab his arm. The sudden tug on his arm spun him around, but he kept his momentum as he yanked as hard as he could, trying to break free. The creature kept a firm grasp, causing it to stumble forward before Birch managed to break free. The zombie slammed into several other creatures, sending them all tumbling to the ground in a heap. With the window only about 10 yards away and zombies hot on his heels, Birch adjusted his run so that he was headed straight for a smaller ghoul. The zombie was so damaged that he couldn't tell how old or even what sex it was. The ghoul that remained was little more than a hunger-filled husk of rotting flesh. Birch let out a grunt as he accelerated into the creature, grabbing it by the throat and lifting it off its feet. His arm muscles strained as he kept the ghoul clear of the ground before throwing it toward the window. The zombie moaned as it crashed through the glass, taking out the entirety of the window and wooden frame that held it in place. Birch barely slowed down as he reached the window, jumping up and flinging his legs through the opening without so much as a cursory glance inside. As soon as he landed inside the small office building, the creature he had thrown through the window reached out and grabbed his leg. In a swift, forceful motion, he drove the tip of the knife into its forehead, ending the threat. Birch yanked the knife free before grabbing his flashlight. However, he didn't turn it on. He could hear a lot of moaning and movement inside the building, as if dozens of creatures were wandering around the cubicles that took up the majority of the room. He stayed low and darted across the aisle into the first cubicle he spotted. A few seconds later, a couple of nearby ghouls shambled into the light as they investigated the shattered window. Birch was completely covered in darkness, as the light from the windows didn't reach his cubicle. Despite the risks, he poked his head up from behind cover, looking out across the floor. While his eyes weren't fully adjusted to the darkness, he could still see a significant amount of movement. Even through the dimly lit room, he spotted the staircase in the middle of the back wall. Move, man, move. Birch's thoughts were enough to get him up from his position, shoving one of the curious ghouls in the back as he darted down the aisle toward the back of the building. The zombie stumbled forward, careening into a cubicle wall and bringing it down, sending an audible alert to the other ghouls. Within seconds, the moaning inside the office intensified, as every zombie on the floor focused in that direction. Birch didn't dwell on it, instead relying on instinct to drive his actions. As he reached the back aisle of the building, several creatures were there to greet him. Birch did his best to keep his speed up, raising his knife and jamming it into the eye of the first creature he encountered. Rather than attempt to yank it free, he gripped the handle tight and continued pushing it back into the others. He let the weapon go, allowing it to fall to the ground along with the defeated ghoul. As he continued to run through the aisle toward the staircase, he drew another one of the knives, ready to strike if need be. Birch bobbed and weaved his way through the aisle, shoving a few creatures out of the way while avoiding the decaying hands of others. As he reached the stairwell, he was relieved to only see a couple of ghouls attempting to navigate the stairs. He rushed up the stairs, knowing that his window to reach the vehicle was quickly closing. He darted to his right as the first creature he approached lunged for him, losing its balance and tumbling down to the first floor. The next creature he approached managed to take a step without tumbling, so Birch helped it along by grabbing its arm and shoving it hard on the back. He stopped for a moment and watched as the zombie flew through the air, landing on top of several ghouls attempting to pursue him to the second floor. As Birch reached the second floor, he spotted some movement scattered around, but nowhere near as many creatures as were on the first floor. He quickly spotted the windows facing the APC and rushed to them. Birch made sure to stay out of sight from the building across the street, poking his head out from behind the wall to catch a quick glimpse of the threat. There was one militiaman standing not 10 yards away from him, however. The man was looking out toward the neighborhood. In the alley just below the window was the APC, with the rebar sticking out. Several creatures roamed around it, drawn to the noise and movement the impaled zombies were making. Birch looked down at his watch, seeing that he only had 3 minutes before their time was up. Rather than think things through, he continued to rely on instinct. "Here goes nothing," Birch muttered. Birch raised his assault rifle as he moved in front of the window. It only took a split second for him to acquire the target and begin squeezing the trigger. The bullets ripped through the window before reaching their intended target. Birch's aim was true as 3 rounds hit the militiaman's center mass, dropping him to the ground. Birch quickly looked to the alley below, getting his bearings on the APC. As he did, he could hear the moans intensifying behind him. He moved back as far as he could from the window before sprinting forward, covering his face as he leaped through it. The older glass and wooden frame shattered upon impact, weakened from the gunshots. Birch flew through the air, and within seconds he made contact with the APC. His feet hit the top, but his momentum carried him forward. His instincts kicked in, and he forced himself to drop down. His body collided with some of the rebar, knocking the wind out of him as he managed to catch himself before falling completely off the vehicle. While he was dazed, he quickly snapped back to the moment as one of the ghouls impaled on the rebar reached out for him, grabbing onto his boot. Birch shook off the ghoul as he pulled himself to his feet, looking around frantically for the hatch. As he spotted it, gunshots went off from above, one of them ripping through his left shoulder. Birch let out a scream as the pain was intense, a fire ripping through his muscles. He dropped to one knee, expecting the next shot to be the one that finished him off. He stayed there for several seconds, accepting his fate, but the kill shot never came. Confused, he looked back up toward the rooftop, seeing a militiaman slumped over the edge of the roof. "Thanks, Calvin," Birch muttered. Birch used his good arm to open up the hatch to the APC and jump inside. As he slammed the lid shut, he heard more bullets pinging off the metal roof. "Shoot all you want. You aren't getting through this," he said to himself. Birch made his way over to the controls, starting up the vehicle as he got into the driver's seat. He flicked a few switches before hitting the gas. The vehicle lurched forward and veered off to the side before Birch got full control over it. "Easy now, girl, you're in good hands," he reassured the APC. Birch made the turn away from downtown, running over a few creatures in the process. The vehicle's powerful engine roared as it sped through the streets, its armored exterior protecting Birch from the militia's onslaught. Chapter 6. Zion and Jinx continued making their way through the sewers. Despite putting considerable distance between them and the creatures who had fallen through the collapsed portion, their moans continued to echo throughout the corridors. "I could live to be 100 and that sound would still creep me out," Jinx said. "Tell me about it, brother," Zion replied. "I thought hearing gunshots going off in my neighborhood every night was the worst sound. I'd love to go back to that if it meant I wouldn't have to hear that shit anymore." "Be careful what you wish for. If the militia decides they want white salmon." Jinx trailed off as he noticed the look of concern on Zion's face, clearly bothered by the thought of that. He quickly changed the subject, shining his flashlight up towards the surface towards a manhole cover. "What do you say? You want to see where we are?" Zion perked up, nodding as he began climbing up the ladder. It only took him a moment to get to the top, pushing gently on the metal cover and lifting it up a few inches. A split second later, he ducked back down, the cover clattering back into place with a metallic sound. "I'm going to go out on a limb and assume it didn't look good?" Jinx asked. Zion shook his head as he climbed back down the ladder, splashing down in the sewer water before speaking. "I knocked one of those things onto its ass when I picked it up, and there was nothing but feet past it." "I guess we keep walking then," Jinx said. Zion nodded as the two of them continued working their way down the sewer line. "I don't know about you, but I'm going to insist on a hot shower when I get back to town," Jinx added. "Damn right. Once we're on the road, I'm calling ahead and having someone start a damn bonfire to heat up some water. At this point, I'm ready to clear-cut the entire forest to keep that flow of hot water going," Zion replied. "I'm going to make some calls and push for a weekend pass to Seattle," Jinx said. "You getting tired of the small-town life already?" Zion asked. "Not at all. But they have power in some parts of the city." "Oh hell, sign my ass up for that," Zion responded. Jinx smirked as he replied in a playful tone, "Oh, are you getting tired of the small-town life already?" "If it means I can have power, hell yeah I am. Hot water and video games? I'd never leave my apartment," Zion said. Jinx continued laughing as he led them deeper into the sewers. Rumor has it they have the water and sewer system back up and running as well. "If you're truly my friend, you'll never say the word sewer to me again," Zion said. Both of them broke into a fit of laughter at their current situation, but it was short-lived as the light coming from Jinx's flashlight began reflecting off a solid brick wall ahead. "Well, that doesn't look promising," Jinx muttered. Jinx got up close to the wall, shining the light all around, hoping that there was another tunnel leading off to either side. He let out a sigh as the only thing he found was more wall. "Looks like this is the end of the line." "You want me to check it out?" Zion asked. "Nah, I got it," Jinx replied. Jinx handed over a couple of heavy bags of ammunition to Zion before climbing up the ladder. He paused at the top, mentally preparing himself for the bad news he was bound to see once he lifted up the manhole cover. As he pressed on the metal cover, pushing it up a few inches, he muttered curse words under his breath as he laid eyes on an impossible situation. The sewer line had dead-ended in a neighborhood teeming with zombies. Dozens were in every direction around the manhole. While they were somewhat spread out, there were more than enough close to the manhole to cause them significant problems. Jinx continued staring out past the creatures, hoping to find someplace to lie low. While there were lots of options to pick from, he settled on a 2-story brick house directly across from them. Most of the houses in the neighborhood had bars on the windows, but this one didn't. Jinx would have loved to have had the extra layer of security, especially given how many of those things were roaming around, but it would slow them down in getting in. And time was something they didn't have the luxury of with that big of a mob surrounding them. Jinx slid back down the ladder, where Zion was anxiously awaiting. "So how are we looking?" Zion asked. "About as good as we did when you checked," Jinx replied. "Damn it. So what's the play?" "We have to get above ground. Those things are still roaming around down here, and I want to move on our terms, not theirs," Jinx explained. "Where are we going?" Zion asked. "There's a brick house just across from us to the right of the ladder. It's 2 stories, so worst case, we should be able to barricade the stairs," Jinx replied. "And then what?" Zion asked. "Hope that Birch got a hold of that APC, because if he didn't, then we're going to have to make some hard choices," Jinx said. "I do love it when you give those upbeat speeches before a suicide run." Zion smirked as Jinx moved over to the ladder. Before he could begin climbing, Zion pulled him back, taking the lead. "I'll go up first. I'll clear the way for you to get up," Zion said. Jinx nodded, knowing that Zion was right. "Let's do it." Zion got up to the manhole cover, glancing down to get a thumbs up from Jinx before breaking out. With a forceful shove, he tossed the heavy metal cover to the side before leaping to the pavement. Immediately, one of the nearby zombies turned and reached out for him, excited to have fresh meat in front of it. Zion wasted no time in attacking the ghoul, stepping forward and grasping the zombie by the throat and choke slamming it to the ground. He could hear the skull crack from the impact, causing the creature to convulse for a moment before falling lifeless. The commotion, however, drew the attention of the dozens of zombies in the immediate vicinity, all of whom began shambling towards them. Zion grabbed the heavy manhole cover, gripping it with one hand and swinging it as hard as he could towards a couple of nearby creatures. The weight of the makeshift weapon made quick work of the heads of the ghouls as it made contact with them. "Are you coming or not?" Zion called out. Yeah, working on it," Jinx grumbled. Jinx struggled to get through the manhole cover with the number of weapons and bags that were slung over his shoulder. It took a moment, but finally he was above ground. "To the house. Let's move," Jinx ordered. Zion and Jinx took off towards the house, Zion leading the way like a fullback, plowing through anything in his way. Jinx, on the other hand, took a more violent approach to their run, slinging his assault rifle around and popping off rounds as they ran. The duo left a trail of bodies in their wake as they rushed towards the house. When Zion reached the door, he wasted no time in delivering a forceful kick to the door. However, it was locked up tight, the entire frame bouncing upon impact. "It's not budging." Zion shouted. "Figure it out, man," Jinx urged. Jinx stood a few feet away from Zion, aiming his rifle at the closest zombies and squeezing the trigger. For every one he dropped, however, it seemed like two more popped up in their place. After several shots, Jinx dropped the rifle down a bit so that he could get a better look at the battlefield. "Just shoot the damn locks out." Jinx's panic was deserved due to hundreds of ghouls shambling towards them. Despite Jinx's best efforts, there were dozens of zombies already in the yard and getting closer. Zion gave the door one more forceful kick, which did nothing but make his leg recoil with a hint of pain. "Ah, to hell with this," Zion muttered. Zion swung the shotgun around from his shoulder, chambering around before aiming it at the locks. His first shot ripped through the deadbolt, and rather than risk it, he chambered another round and sent it through the latch, opening the door. "We're in." Jinx squeezed off several more rounds, striking down several ghouls before retreating into the house. As they cleared the threshold, Jinx threw the door closed as Zion grabbed a bookcase that was directly behind it and pulled it to the ground. "That ain't gonna hold them for long," Zion warned. "It doesn't need to. Just get upstairs," Jinx ordered. Zion nodded and followed Jinx through the house towards the staircase in the middle. Before they reached it, the zombie mob reached the front door, pushing and banging against it, motivating them to move even faster. The two of them rushed up the stairs, getting to the second floor and quickly clearing it. "Now what?" Zion asked. "Start throwing everything you can find down the stairs. We're going to have to hold them off until Birch and Calvin get here," Jinx explained. Zion nodded and immediately grabbed a bookcase that was just across from the stairs. With a forceful shove, he sent it tumbling down the stairs, the cheaply made furniture breaking up as it went. "Well, that ain't gonna work." Jinx let out a whistle from the master bedroom at the far end of the hall, getting Zion's attention. "I have the good stuff in here." Zion rushed into the bedroom to find an antique chest of drawers along the back wall. Both he and Jinx groaned upon lifting it up, the weight almost more than they could handle. Despite their struggles, they managed to get it out of the bedroom and at the top of the stairs. Before they pushed it down, they spotted a couple of creatures beginning to ascend. "How about a little bowling for zombies?" Jinx suggested. "They're set up, so let's knock them down," Zion replied. The two of them let out groans as they pushed the heavy piece of furniture over the top step. Once gravity took over, they watched with satisfaction as the antique wood bounced on the stairs, crushing the two creatures that were on it. When it made it to the first floor, the front legs of the piece cracked through the wooden floorboards, wedging itself into place right in the middle of the stairs. A few ghouls came up to it, trying to get through, but there wasn't enough room. "That seems to have done the trick," Zion said. "If it's all the same to you, I'd like to get a few more obstacles for them to get through," Jinx replied. "I'll check the other bedrooms for some lighter stuff," Zion offered. "I'll see what else is in the master," Jinx said. "Don't worry about it. You get Birch on the line and let him know where we are," Zion instructed. Zion walked over to the window at the far end of the hallway, looking out and seeing a horde of ghouls spread out over the neighboring yards. "Because I don't want to be here any longer than I have to." "We'll be out of here soon," Jinx assured him. Jinx nodded as he retreated into the master bedroom, pulling out the radio and tuning it to the right channel. "Hey Birch, do you copy?" "I read you, Jinx," Birch replied. "Good, because we're in a bit of a situation and could use some help." Chapter 7. Birch drove the APC down the road towards the house where Calvin was holed up. Despite knowing that the vehicle wouldn't be affected by regular bullets, the militiamen stranded on the rooftops of downtown continued to fire. "Those boys are big mad at me," Birch said with a satisfied chuckle as he drove down the road, not worrying about rolling over zombies in his path. He cracked a smile and began petting the steering wheel like it was a beloved pet. "Oh girl, where have you been all my life? Or at least since the beginning of all this undead nonsense?" Birch continued to drive down the street, making a right turn to cut through the yard of the target house. As he got to the back of the house, right underneath a bedroom window, he popped up through the hatch. "Come on, Calvin, where are you at?" Birch let out a deafening whistle, hoping it would be enough to get the attention of his sharpshooting partner. A few tense moments passed as dreadful thoughts began pouring through Birch's mind about Calvin's fate. Fortunately, all of them were unfounded as the window above the APC opened and Calvin's smiling face emerged from above. "That's a nice ride you got there. Are you going my way, sailor?" Calvin teased. Birch chuckled and gave Calvin a playful middle finger. "Would you get down here? We need to figure out where Jinx and Zion are." Before they could do anything else, they heard a thunderous crashing sound in the distance, soon followed by gunfire. "Did he just blow something else up?" Calvin asked. "When did he blow something up?" Birch replied. "Right about the time you jumped out that window," Calvin said. "I must have missed it since I was being shot at," Birch said. "You'd be amazed at what you miss when bullets are whizzing by your head," Calvin remarked. "Lots of experience with that, huh?" Birch inquired. "More than I'd like. Let's just say I had some feuds with my neighbors while growing up," Calvin admitted. Birch shook his head and laughed before motioning for Calvin to come down. Rather than take the stairs, Calvin went feet first out of the window, hanging onto the ledge before hopping down the final couple of feet to the roof of the vehicle. Birch helped him inside, both of them getting settled before securing the hatch and discussing their situation. "Have you heard from Jinx?" Calvin asked. "Just before I made that suicide run to pick this beauty up," Birch replied. "Did he say where he was going?" Calvin inquired. "They were going to try the sewer again," Birch said. "Let's get to the other side of town then," Calvin suggested. "Is that where the sewer leads?" Birch asked. "No clue, but it makes sense in my head. It dead-ended just short of downtown, so maybe it does on the other side too," Calvin speculated. Birch thought about it for a moment before nodding in agreement. "It's as good an idea as any. It's probably best we don't hang around here." "Those boys ain't getting down off the roof without one of these," Calvin noted. "Yeah, but I'd wager they have radios and can let their friends know where we are," Birch said. Calvin nodded in agreement before waving his hand in a flourish towards the steering wheel. "By all means, sir, take us away." Birch quickly got back behind the wheel and hit the gas, the vehicle lurching forward as the tracks caught traction. He headed north, cutting through the yards without a care in the world. "Hey, Calvin," Birch called out. "What's up, Birch?" Calvin responded. "I really appreciate your shooting back there. When that guy sent a round through my shoulder, I thought I was done for," Birch said. "Just doing my job," Calvin replied. "Still, I know shooting another man isn't the easiest thing to do. I just want you to know I appreciate it," Birch said. "Well, he was messing with my buddy. I don't stand for that kind of stuff," Calvin stated. Over the next 20 minutes, Birch drove them through the neighborhoods, running over zombies as they went. While they drove, Calvin looked through the small, bulletproof slats on the side of the vehicle, trying to spot any signs of militia activity. Once they got in the vicinity of the west side of town, Birch parked the APC underneath a vacant carport and switched it off. He made sure that the radio was on the correct channel before setting it on the dash. "Did you see anything while we were driving?" Birch asked. "Just those undead critters. And man, there were a load of them too," Calvin replied. "Don't worry, with this thing we'll just roll right over them without any trouble," Birch assured. "What about the gas? Something this big has got to guzzle it more than a porn star guzzles." Calvin almost finished his thought before realizing he was sitting with Birch and not his Portland crew. While he was friendly with Birch, he didn't know how receptive he would be to that level of inappropriate humor. Birch waited for him to finish his thought, ultimately breaking into laughter as he could see the conflicted thoughts fighting it out in Calvin's head. "I get what you're saying. Don't worry, this may be a big bitch, but she's fuel efficient." Birch glanced back at the fuel gauge, seeing that it was still half full. "We have a couple hundred more miles before we have to worry." That's a relief. It was a chore to get a hold of her. "I'd hate to go through that trouble only to run on empty before we could do what we needed to do," Calvin said. "Well, we're good." And Calvin? "Yeah, Birch?" Calvin responded. "Just for the record, I'm R-rated and I've heard it all. So you don't have to censor yourself around me," Birch assured. Calvin let out a chuckle as he nodded. Duly noted. Before they could continue, the radio crackled to life. Hey Birch, do you copy? Jinx's voice came through. I read you, Jinx, Birch replied. Good, because we're in a bit of a situation and could use some help, Jinx said. What's going on? Birch asked. We got back into the sewer that led west, but in the process, I may have collapsed half of the side street, Jinx explained. Yeah, that sounds pretty on brand for you, Birch said. A hint of laughter came over the radio as Jinx continued. Yeah, I know. I mean, if I'm going to have a reputation, this one isn't the worst one to have. So where are you two at now? Birch inquired. In a neighborhood about a mile west of downtown. I don't know the exact location, but it's a 2-story brick house. You can't miss it, Jinx described. Yeah, I'm sure that you're the only owner of a 2-story brick house in this town. Because it's such a rare and unique design, Birch quipped. Well, this one does have 1,000 of those things surrounding it, Jinx pointed out. That might make it a little easier to spot, Birch conceded. Were you able to acquire us a ride? Jinx asked. The APC is gassed up and ready to go, Birch confirmed. Good, because you're going to need it to get us out, Jinx said. A loud gunshot went off on the radio, causing Birch to flinch. Holy hell, Jinx, are you okay? What the hell was that? Birch asked. Yeah, we're fine. Zion just popped off a shotgun shell into some of those things, Jinx replied. If there's 1,000 of them, why is he wasting the ammo? Birch questioned. Oh, did I forget to mention that they're inside the house? Jinx added. You probably should have led with that. We're on the way. Birch's voice carried a panicked sense of urgency, prompting Jinx to let out a guttural laugh. When the laughter hit Birch's ears, he looked over to Calvin, both of them confused. I'm starting to think you and I have very different senses of humor, Corporal, Birch remarked. Relax, Birch, we're fine. We're on the 2nd floor and have the staircase barricaded pretty well, Jinx assured. If it's barricaded so well, then why is Zion shooting? Birch asked. We'll file it under better safe than sorry, Jinx replied. Well, look, we're not too far out. Hang tight and be ready to move when we get there, Birch instructed. Copy that, Jinx acknowledged. Birch tossed the radio back onto the dash and hit the gas, the vehicle lurching forward from the carport. He drove with purpose, rushing to the western neighborhood before cutting south. I think we're about a mile outside of downtown. Just keep an eye out for a mob of those things, Birch instructed. You got it, Calvin replied. Calvin bounced back and forth between the two sides of the vehicle, looking out the slats in the hopes of spotting the mob. As he did that, Birch focused on the road ahead. They barely got a few blocks before Calvin yelled out. I think I got them. Back it up and to the right, Calvin directed. Birch did as instructed, throwing the vehicle into reverse and pulling back to the last intersection. As he spun the APC around, he let out a gasp. Mother of God, that's a lot of those things, Birch exclaimed. The two of them looked through the front of the vehicle, seeing the horde of zombies around the 2-story brick house a block up. The creatures were pressed tightly against each other, densely packed all the way to the house. Hey Jinx, we found you. Where do you want us to pull up? Birch asked. Do you think you can get to the north side of the house? There's a window on the side yard, Jinx suggested. Yeah, we're on the way, Birch confirmed. We'll be ready, Jinx replied. Birch hit the gas, picking up some steam as they headed towards the mob. You may want to hang on, this is going to get a little bumpy. Calvin took a seat, grabbing onto one of the railings inside for stability. A few seconds later, the vehicle began shaking violently, bouncing up and down as the tracks rolled over the bodies of the ghouls. While there wasn't a chance of the vehicle getting stuck, it was still a slow process of pushing through them. Some of the ghouls were simply moved to the side, while others fell underneath the treads. A few unlucky ghouls had the rebar pierce right through their bodies, dragging them along on the trip to the house. It took several minutes of slow moving, but eventually, the APC pulled up to the house. Get the hatch, will you? Birch requested. You got it, Calvin replied. Calvin popped open the top hatch and was immediately greeted by Jinx's smiling face just a few feet above. I know you military boys don't make that much money, but damn, I'll chip in a few bucks if it means you can live in a better neighborhood, Calvin joked. Jinx let out a laugh as he began handing down the weapons and ammunition they had gathered. Don't worry, we weren't buyers. So you're squatters then, Calvin remarked. Jinx just shook his head before turning back and yelling out, Hey Zion, our ride is here. Another shotgun blast went off before Zion appeared in the window. Come on, let me get you down there. They're starting to squeeze through the debris, Zion said. Jinx nodded and hopped out the window, grabbing onto Zion's arm as he lowered him down to the vehicle roof. As soon as Jinx was safe, Zion deftly hopped out the window, grabbing onto the sill and dropping safely onto the roof. As they got into the vehicle, Jinx immediately spotted the bullet wound on Birch's shoulder. Jesus, man, you're shot? Jinx exclaimed. Yeah, it's a flesh wound, Birch replied. Still, go sit in the back and get it properly wrapped up. I'll drive us out of here, Jinx ordered. Do you have any idea where we're going or what we're going to do? Zion asked. Yeah, we're going to get our boat back. Chapter 8. Jinx drove the APC towards the northern part of town, eventually rolling out of the neighborhood and into a wooded area between the last house and the river. Once he found a covered spot that overlooked the water, he turned back to the others. Okay, we should be safe up here, at least until we figure out exactly what we're doing, Jinx said. Do you know where the boat is? Zion asked. Somewhere out there on the water, Jinx replied. If that drone was still active, they have to be close to town. Calvin put the finishing touches on a new bandage from one of the medical kits that was stashed away. He gave Birch a pat on the arm once he was done, causing him to wince. Hey, easy there, Birch said. Sorry, man, Calvin said. Muscle memory taking over there, but you're good to go. Birch moved his arm around a bit, groaning as pain shot through his body. Yeah, that's going to get real stiff now that the adrenaline is wearing off. Calvin tossed him a pack of pain medication from the med kit, but Birch shook his head once he realized what they were. I need to stay alert, especially if we're going to be retaking the boat, Birch said. No offense, Birch, Zion interjected, but even without those pain meds, you aren't coming with us to take the boat, so you might as well go ahead and take them. Birch looked over to Jinx, who gave a nod. Zion's right. You're not good in a fight, especially a potential amphibious assault. Birch's frustration was chiseled into his face, but he softened once he realized that Jinx was right. Let me have that water. Calvin handed a bottle over to him so that he could take the pills. Once they were down, he finished off the bottle before tossing it aside. Okay, so how are we getting them back? Zion, do you have any experience with amphibious assaults? Jinx asked. I realize this is going to come as a shock to you, Jinx, but I didn't really get to spend a lot of time in the pool while growing up in the inner city, Zion replied. Fair enough. Calvin? Jinx continued. I can pick somebody off from shore, but unless it involves a six-pack and skinny dipping with a hot girl, I'm not much use in the water, Calvin admitted. I'm starting to think taking the boat back by force isn't going to be the way to go, Jinx said. We're already trading their men for the ammo. Why not just add our guys onto the deal as well? Zion suggested. I wouldn't make a 2-for-1 deal, Jinx said. Then you better be damn convincing when you call his ass up, Zion said. Jinx contemplated the situation for a moment before acting. Damn it, he muttered. Jinx knew that Zion was right, and there wasn't another way. They didn't have the manpower to retake the boat by force, and he knew it. Okay, here goes nothing. Jinx grabbed the radio, dialing it up to the proper channel before clicking it on. Hey Lucas, are you there, buddy? Almost immediately, a surly voice came over the radio that Jinx didn't recognize. Hang on, I'll get him. Despite the short message, Jinx and the others could tell the seething anger and frustration bubbling up within the man. I'm guessing they know we borrowed their ride, Jinx said. Hello, Jinx. Good of you to reach out. Lucas's voice crackled over the radio. I must say, I am impressed with what you've done of late. You should see me when my back isn't against the wall and I have some time to plan. I've just been making this up as I go along, Jinx replied. Your Corporal Parker here did say that I shouldn't underestimate you, Lucas said. I gotta say, that is sound advice, Jinx responded. The ironic thing is, I didn't think I was underestimating you, Lucas said. I knew you were going to try something, even if I secretly hoped you'd take the easy way out and leave the ammo for us. Collapsing an entire street, however, wasn't on my bingo card, Lucas admitted. Don't forget your little recreational vehicle here, Jinx said. Rest assured, I haven't forgotten about it. In fact, I'm guessing that's why you're calling, Lucas said. You'd be correct. And as much as I love the highbrow conversations with you, what do you say we just cut to the chase? Jinx suggested. The floor is yours, Jinx. By all means, speak your mind, Lucas replied. We both have something the other wants. You have my men, and I have the only vehicle nearby that would allow you to get to your men, Jinx explained. And what makes you think I don't have a fleet of those APC vehicles just sitting on the edge of town? Lucas challenged. Because if you had more than one, you would have used it already to go collect your men. You also would have made a beeline to the gun store. The simple fact that it's been well over an hour since we vacated the premises and you're still on the boat and taking my calls tells me I have the only one, Jinx reasoned. That's some solid reasoning. And you're correct, Jinx. You do have the only one at my disposal, Lucas admitted. But surely you must realize that we are well supplied and can easily call for reinforcements. Bend is 150 miles away on a good day. Based on the injuries some of your men have from my sniper, we both know that they're going to need medical attention sooner rather than later. And you know that calling in reinforcements will take time that you don't have, Jinx countered. You are a clever one. So what would you like in exchange for my vehicle? Lucas asked. You have two things I need. My men on that boat and the ammo that we have on the roof of the gun store, Jinx stated. Trading 2 for 1 doesn't sound like a favorable deal for me, Jinx, Lucas said. If it makes you feel better, pretend that I have a coupon, Jinx said. Lucas let out a bit of a laugh before continuing. I wish I could, Jinx, I really do. But when my boss learns that I gave away the farm just to save my men, he's not going to be happy. Is saving lives not enough for him? Jinx asked. I'm afraid it's not, Lucas replied. Sounds like you have a great boss there, Jinx said. I've had worse, Lucas admitted. Okay, I tell you what. You agree to my deal, and I'll make sure you get 5 of those bags from the roof of the gun store. That's 10,000 rounds of ammo. It's not what you were hoping to get from this raid, but it's not exactly chump change, Jinx offered. Make it 20 bags and we'll consider it a done deal, Lucas countered. 15 bags. Final offer, Jinx said. I can live with 15. So how would you like to proceed? Lucas asked. There's a town just to the east of here called Fisher's Corner. Dave there should have a map that can show you exactly where. There's a small breakaway street of houses to the southwest. Meet us there in 2 hours and we'll do the exchange, Jinx instructed. Do you want your people with me? Lucas asked. You can leave them on the boat. Just make sure they have a radio so that I can talk to them. And it would be swell if you remembered that we have code words worked out. So if you're thinking of leaving a man behind to keep them under lock and key, just know that I'll know, Jinx warned. Jinx, as I have told you before, I strive to be a man of my word. And I'm telling you now that there won't be anybody on this boat outside of your men, Lucas assured him. Good, and one more thing, Jinx added. Name it, Lucas said. I want you to come alone, Jinx demanded. I will see you in 2 hours, Lucas agreed. The line went dead as Jinx put the radio down, letting out a sigh of relief after the tense negotiations. Do you trust him? Zion asked. Normally I'd say not as far as I could throw him, but there's something different about him, Jinx said. Jinx? Birch interjected. Oh, don't get me wrong, Birch. We're going to be armed to the teeth and ready for an ambush. Still, though, he seemed sincere, Jinx assured him. Okay, I was starting to get worried for a moment there, Birch said. What you should be worried about is that I haven't blown anything up in the last hour, and still have a few of those devices left, Jinx said with a wink, prompting the private to roll his eyes in response. Come on, we have a haul to get back to Fisher's Corner. And the clock is ticking, Jinx said. Jinx got back into the driver's seat as everyone settled into the back of the APC. Before starting it up, he looked down at his watch, punching in the 2 hours into it before starting the countdown. While Jinx drove, the others in the back began checking the weapons. Calvin dug through the collection of gear that they had taken from the gun shop, getting a smile on his face when he saw a high-end hunting rifle. Oh, please tell me that you picked that one up for me, Calvin said. Yeah, I know you're not a fan of those military-style sniper rifles, so I had Jinx there pick you out something nice, Zion said. Calvin picked up the sleek black hunting rifle, checking every moving part on it. He was filled with so much excitement that he wasn't blinking, just staring in amazement at the weapon. The gun shop close to where I lived had one like this. This is the kind of weapon you'd have to pass a credit check before they'd even let you hold it. But they couldn't stop me from staring at it like a teenager spotting his first set of titties. Calvin looked through the scope, moving the various dials around to see what they did. Oh, that's fantastic right there. What is it? Zion asked. Jinx sprung for the night vision on it, Calvin said. There are a few more of those night vision scopes in the bags too, Jinx said. They're not going to do us a whole lot of good today, but they should come in handy for those on watch. Oh, without a doubt. Those militia bastards are sneaky when the moon hides behind the clouds, Calvin said. Well, they aren't going to be doing it anymore, Birch chimed in. Really, guys, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for this. I will treasure it always, Calvin said. You can thank us by shooting people with it if they start shooting at us, Jinx said. You just tell me where you want me to shoot them, Jinx. Because with this scope, I'll be able to hit just about anything night or day, Calvin promised. Calvin settled into his seat, still admiring his new weapon. Meanwhile, Birch looked over to Zion with puppy dog eyes. Can I help you, Birch? Zion asked. Well, you got him a new toy. I want one too, Birch said, breaking into laughter. The laughs didn't last long as it agitated his gunshot wound, forcing a groan out of him. Yeah, you better take it easy, brother, Zion advised. Yeah, still. Something new would have been nice, Birch said. Zion reached into the pile on the floor, moving a couple of bags out of the way before pulling out one of the scoped assault rifles. He held it up in front of Birch's face. If I give you this, are you going to stop pouting? Birch perked up, smiling and nodding playfully. Oh, without a doubt. Zion tossed the weapon over to Birch, who got a big grin on his face, still continuing on with a playful tone. Thank you, Santa Zion. You're welcome. Now, never call me that again, Zion said. Zion remained stone-faced for a few seconds before breaking into laughter himself. The laughter was contagious, as everyone inside the vehicle joined in. Despite the seriousness of their situation, the group savored moments of levity like this. Chapter 9. Jinx rolled the APC into Fisher's Corner, the rumble of the engine and the sound of the treads on the pavement sending noise radiating through the air. He quickly pulled it behind a house and shut it down. Before he could even get out of his seat, however, he looked out towards the neighborhood just across the field behind them, spotting a handful of zombies shambling in their direction. It is not going to take a lot of noise to draw those things this way, Jinx remarked. We got company? Zion asked. Just a handful of stragglers, Jinx replied. Both men looked out the window back towards the neighborhood, staring at the encroaching ghouls as they shambled across the field. Their main focus was past them, to the tree line, hoping that they weren't joined by any more of their friends. When the zombies reached the halfway point of the field, with nobody following in their footsteps, both of them relaxed a bit. Go take them out quietly and get back here. We have some pre-party planning to get done, Jinx instructed. I'm on it, Zion responded. Zion walked back and popped the hatch open, pulling himself out quickly. "Where are you off to?" Calvin asked. "Just going to bust a few heads." "I'll be right back," Zion said. Calvin shrugged as Zion jumped off the roof of the APC, clearing the rebar with ease. Wasting no time, Zion strolled out into the field, honing in on the closest zombie, which was a few yards away from the other two creatures. Zion pulled a knife from its sheath before planting it right into the forehead of the lead ghoul. He never broke stride as he yanked it right back out on his way to the second target. "Okay, hope you're ready, because you're next," Zion muttered. Zion smacked the outstretched arms of the ghoul out of the way before jamming the blade through the eye socket. He held the entire body weight of the zombie up for a few seconds as it convulsed before shoving it backward to free his blade. The other ghoul had adjusted its course, wandering over towards Zion with an excited moan. Before Zion struck it down, an idea sparked in his mind. "Nah, I got something better for you," Zion said. Zion sheathed his weapon, standing there unarmed as the ghoul got closer and closer to him. Just as the creature's decrepit fingers got within inches of him, Zion smacked them away, spinning the zombie around. Grabbing the creature by the back of the shirt, Zion pushed it towards the houses. His strength was more than enough to contain the violent thrashings of the zombie as it desperately tried to break free. As he approached the APC, the others stared at him in confusion. "Zion, buddy, we've been over this. Just because they're cute and cuddly doesn't mean you can keep one as a pet. Even if you promise to feed him every day," Calvin quipped. "I'm guessing you had some ideas about what to do with him?" Jinx inquired. "Hopefully your new best friend Lucas is on the up and up. But if he's not, my enthusiastic friend here might be of some use," Zion explained. "How? He's not an attack dog," Birch said. "Oh, he very much is. Now we may not be able to bark out commands to him, but if we point him in the right direction, he'll bite," Zion countered. "I'm still not seeing it," Birch admitted. "I know we haven't hammered out the plan yet, but I'm pretty damn sure it's going to involve taking cover in a house, right?" Zion asked. Zion stared down the others, who all shrugged and nodded in agreement. "Good. Now these houses have closets, right? We slam old Fido into one of them, and if we get company, we let him out to play," Zion proposed. "I like it. Find a spot for him 2 doors down," Jinx instructed. "Somebody want to get the doors for me?" Zion asked. "I got it. I only got one arm, so might as well feel useful while I can," Birch offered. As the two of them walked off to stash their surprise, Calvin and Jinx walked around to the front of the house. Jinx made his way over to the front stoop, taking a seat on one of the brick stairs as Calvin played around with his new rifle. "Calvin, I got a question for you," Jinx began. "What do you want to know?" Calvin replied. "When you and Birch were on your own, did you shoot anybody that saw you?" Jinx asked. Calvin racked his brain for a moment before nodding. "I can't say for certain, but I think so. Although I'm pretty sure it's the same guy I shot last, and he didn't make it. Why do you ask?" "Because Lucas only knows for certain that there's 3 of us. Me and Zion from the gun store, and Birch who took his toy out for a joyride," Jinx explained. "So you want me to be out of sight, out of mind, huh?" Calvin guessed. "Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm going to talk to him man to man out in the street. I'll have Zion backing me up, and I'll have Birch down the street zombie sitting," Jinx detailed. "Where do you want me?" Calvin inquired. "Wherever you think you're going to be most effective with that thing," Jinx replied, pointing down to Calvin's new rifle, prompting him to give the weapon a hug. "How much time we got before it's showtime?" Calvin asked. "About 45 minutes, Jinx estimated." Calvin stood up, walking over to the middle of the street with Jinx following behind. He stood there for several moments, taking long looks in both directions. After another minute of contemplation, he pointed towards a large tree a block down. "I'm going to get up in that big boy," Calvin decided. "You're going to be exposed up there," Jinx warned. "I'm also going to have full view of the battlefield, and if I get up high enough, I'll be able to keep an eye on our rear too," Calvin explained. "What if you need to get down in a hurry?" Jinx questioned. I saw some rope back in the APC that I think I'll borrow. I guess with those boys only using the top entrance, they've had to rappel down some stuff before. I'm going to do the same thing if it comes down to it, Calvin reasoned. Okay, if that's where you want to go, Jinx agreed. I want to go back to my house and curl up with my woman for some much-needed R&R. But as far as this moment goes, yeah, I guess that's where I want to be, Calvin stated. Do what you need to do, and let me know if you need anything, Jinx offered. You got it, Jinx, Calvin acknowledged. And Calvin? Jinx called. Yeah, buddy? Calvin answered. If you see anybody, and I mean anybody other than Lucas trying to get the jump on us, you do not hesitate or wait on them to fire first, Jinx instructed. I'm your angel in the sky, Calvin assured. Jinx nodded as Calvin rushed off to get prepared for the assault. Left alone in the middle of the road, Jinx looked around the neighborhood, taking in its beauty. Thoughts of children running around playing and parents mowing the lawn and grilling out began creeping into his mind. With a whistle blaring out behind him, the vision of a bygone era vanished. Yeah, Zion? Jinx called. Come on, man, we need you, Zion urged. I'll be there in a second, Jinx replied. Jinx stood there for another moment, taking in the beauty of the neighborhood before letting out a sigh. It's a shame we might have to wreck this place because it is beautiful. Jinx and the others used the next 40 minutes to fortify their positions, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. With a few minutes to spare, Jinx plopped himself down on the front stoop of the house, cracking open a bottle of water and enjoying the moment of quiet. The moment was short-lived as the radio sprang to life. Hello, Jinx. I am approaching your position and will be in Fisher's Corner in a matter of minutes, Lucas's voice crackled through the radio. I'll be in the street awaiting your arrival, Jinx replied. Wonderful. And as agreed, I am coming alone. Lucas confirmed. Let's all hope so, Jinx muttered. Jinx glanced back to the front window, where Zion was sitting with his shotgun at the ready. It's showtime, Jinx announced. Zion gave him a nod as Jinx got up, grabbing the radio and an extra bottle of water as he strolled up to the street, stopping just shy of it. As he gazed out past the houses into the field on the other side, he spotted a lone figure walking towards him. The man was dressed in black combat gear, walking with a sense of pride and confidence. Even from a distance, Jinx spotted the assault rifle that was slung over his shoulder, just like the one he had hanging off of his. I guess next time I should say come unarmed. Jinx chuckled to himself at the oversight as Lucas made his way towards the street. He didn't speak a word until stopping just shy of the road, directly across from Jinx. Jinx, I presume? Lucas greeted. I am. You must be Lucas, Jinx responded. That's me. As advertised, completely alone, Lucas confirmed. Bit of a long walk, was it? Jinx inquired. Not the longest I've had since all this began, but definitely longer than I would have liked, Lucas admitted. Jinx pulled out the extra bottle of water, holding it up so that Lucas could see what it was before tossing it in his direction. Lucas caught it and the two men held them up like they were clinking wine glasses from a distance before drinking. The hospitality is appreciated, Lucas said. It is my fault that you had to walk, so I figured it was the least I could do, Jinx remarked. If you'd like to call your men on the boat to ensure their safety, Lucas offered. Jinx nodded and pulled out the radio, quickly changing the channel to the right one. Corporal Parker, do you copy? Jinx called. Yeah, I'm here, Jinx, Corporal Parker responded. What's your status? Jinx inquired. Your friend Lucas and his men left about 90 minutes ago, Corporal Parker reported. Are you sure? Jinx questioned. Positive. We've had Dave flying around ever since they left, and we haven't spotted anyone, Corporal Parker confirmed. Good. Does Dave have the heavy-duty drone? Jinx asked. We have a team set up for that, but yeah, he's got one, Corporal Parker replied. Good. I want him to start flying over bags to the men on the roof across the street from the gun store, Jinx instructed. Corporal, you weren't serious with that promise, were you? Corporal Parker asked, disbelief evident in his tone. "I'm deadly serious, Parker. 15 bags. Tell him to get moving on them now. And if you don't, I'm going to tell my new friend Lucas here he can have his way with you. Is that understood?" Jinx demanded. "Yes, Jinx, I'll take care of it," Corporal Parker complied. As the radio went dead, Jinx looked over to Lucas, who immediately grabbed his radio. "Roof team. In the next few minutes, a drone will be dropping off 15 bags of ammunition. Let me know when it arrives, and do not interfere with the drone," Lucas instructed. "Yes, sir," came the reply from the militiaman on the other end. "Well, Jinx, you're a man of your word. I appreciate that," Lucas said. "We both want the same thing here." "Nice little hostage exchange, and everybody home by dinner," Jinx remarked. "So what's next, Jinx?" Lucas asked. Before Jinx could respond, the radio communicator in Jinx's ear came on. 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. Calvin's voice alerted. Jinx turned his head slightly to his left, spotting a heavily armed militiaman beside a tree, aiming his rifle towards him. At no more than 30 yards, Jinx knew that if the man was even a decent shot, he had him dead to rights. Chapter 10. Jinx's gaze was fixed on the gunman just down the road, his head and weapon barely poking out from behind a tree. A split second later, Jinx watched as the man's head exploded in a gory display as a bullet ripped through it. Jinx quickly pulled his rifle to the ready, as Lucas did the same. "What the hell, Lucas? We were doing so well," Jinx exclaimed. "I promise you, Jinx, he's not with me," Lucas responded. "Bullshit," Jinx shot back. Before Lucas could respond, the earpiece in Jinx's ear began screeching. Incoming from the field. 2 pickup trucks. Calvin's voice rang out. Jinx looked past Lucas, spotting one of the trucks between the houses, watching as it bounced across the open field. He then aimed his rifle directly at Lucas. "Looks like your friends are here. If you got something to say, you better say it now," Jinx said, his voice hard. Lucas lowered his assault rifle, raising his hands into the sky. "I am a man of my word, Jinx. I came here alone." Jinx stared at Lucas, trying to get a read on him. However, he was forced to break away from the road as the 2 trucks approached the neighborhood. Calvin tried to relay a message to Jinx, but it was drowned out by the gunfire coming from the other side of the street. Bullets impacted the ground and the house Jinx ran towards, narrowly missing him. Zion opened the door, allowing Jinx to dive inside as the bullets continued to fly. He slid to a stop on the hardwood floor before getting up and rushing over to the window, where Zion fired a couple of rounds from his shotgun. "Well, that didn't go as planned," Zion remarked. "Where the hell did Lucas go?" Jinx asked. "He was there when you started running." "The next time I looked, he was gone," Zion replied. More bullets crashed through the window, forcing the 2 of them back behind cover. Jinx readied his assault rifle, popping out and taking quick aim across the street. 3 well-armed men came running out from behind cover, rushing towards the street. Before Jinx could squeeze the trigger, one of the assaulters' heads exploded from the side. One of his partners turned towards the tree, trying to spot where the attack came from, only to receive a bullet to the face. The last standing man screamed out something as he raised his rifle and opened fire towards the tree. Jinx got him in his crosshairs before squeezing the trigger, sending a round into his neck, dropping him to the ground to drown in his own blood. Calvin, are you good, buddy?" Jinx shouted into his communicator. The only thing Jinx could hear through his communicator was yelling and bullet impacts. He managed to make out 2 words through the audio carnage. "I'm bailing," Calvin's voice echoed. "Damn it," Jinx muttered. "Is Calvin okay?" Zion asked. "Yeah, but we lost our eye in the sky," Jinx replied. Jinx's radio communicator came to life again, only this time there was a whisper coming through it. "I got 3 of those assholes coming towards my position. My guess is they're trying to flank you. Might want to keep your eyes out," Birch's voice warned. "I'm on my way," Jinx responded. "You cover the other side. "I got this," Birch insisted. Birch took his hand off the communicator, readying his assault rifle with his good arm as he walked cautiously up towards the front window. The curtains were drawn shut, but they were thin and he could still see outside. Birch positioned himself at an angle to the window, using the door for some cover. A few seconds later, he spotted the first man moving by the window, his gun trained on the house Jinx and Zion were in. "Bide your time, Birch. Bide your time," he muttered to himself. Birch continued aiming his rifle through the window, watching as the second man came into view. He continued following the man with the rifle, not firing until the third man appeared in his view. As soon as he saw the front edge of the next man's rifle, Birch squeezed the trigger as quickly as he could. A trio of rounds ripped through the window, cracking into the side of the middleman's head. A split second later, the other two men turned and opened fire through the front of the house, forcing Birch to dive to the ground. He landed on his bad arm, forcing a yelp to escape his lips as pain surged through his body. Birch got onto his back, firing towards the front door, hoping to deter the men from coming in. The concentrated fire on the front door extinguished that hope. Birch scrambled to his feet, darting into the kitchen and over to the side room. He heard heavy footsteps coming from the front room as the two gunmen entered. Birch kept his aim trained on the door towards the front of the room, expecting someone to burst through it at any moment. Instead, the footsteps moved deeper into the house, completely ignoring the front entrance to the room. "Move, move," Birch muttered under his breath, motivating himself to move. He took several quick but quiet steps towards the front door of the side room, pausing just before opening it, listening for the attackers. When he heard the back door of the side room begin to open, Birch darted out into the front room, aiming his rifle towards the back and firing several times. Due to only having one good arm, his aim was off, the bullets impacting the wall, forcing one of the attackers behind cover. Birch quickly reached out, turning the knob of the closet door where the zombie was trapped, barely pulling it open so that it could escape. As the gunshots came back in his direction, he rushed out the front door, hitting the release for the trap that they had set earlier and slamming the door shut behind him. Birch got out into the yard, the entire neighborhood descending into chaos. Gunfire was popping off in all directions, mostly concentrated on the house that Zion and Jinx were in. "Get to cover, man," Birch shouted. Birch broke from his position, rushing around to the side of the house. He waited, gun at the ready for someone to come out from the house. As he waited, he heard a scream coming from inside, followed by multiple panic shots going off, as if someone was surprised by the creature he left for them. A moment later, more screaming came from the front of the house as the trap on the door was sprung. Birch aimed his rifle towards the man but didn't fire as he saw him writhing on the ground in pain. It was hard to tell exactly what was happening to the man, but there was smoke rising from his flesh, and his screams could be heard over the intense gunfight happening just a couple of doors down. Birch lowered his weapon, shaking his head in disgust at the sight before turning and running towards the back of the house. He knew he needed to get to Jinx, but he stopped dead in his tracks when the backfield came into view. "Mother of God," Birch gasped. 50 zombies were shambling in their direction, drawn to the gun battle. Birch clicked on his communicator before yelling, 50 of those things coming on from the rear. Zion heard the urgent warning as he stepped out in front of the window again, sending another shotgun shell across the street. As he ducked back behind cover, he spotted 2 men breaking from their position and sprinting in his direction. Zion quickly pumped his weapon, only to find there wasn't another shell to chamber in. "That's why I hate these things. Always running empty when you need them the most," Zion grumbled. Bullets began peppering the front of the house, forcing Zion to take cover in the small space between the door and windows. He made himself as small as possible, hoping that the brick outside would be enough to stop any round sent his way. A few seconds later, a concentrated stream of gunfire blew open the lock on the door. The flaming hot fragments from it landed on Zion, who just stood there without reacting. While painful, he channeled it into his rage, preparing to strike as the first gunman kicked the door open. As soon as the man stepped across the threshold, Zion grabbed a knife from his belt and swung it at chest level. He had enough force behind it that the blade went through the man's protective vest and straight into his chest. The gunman was dazed for a moment as the life seeped out of him, giving Zion time to grab him by the vest. He let out a grunt as he turned, yanking the man from his feet, and throwing him through the window and back out into the front yard. Before the body landed on the ground, his partner began firing wildly through the door. Zion hit the deck, the bullets narrowly missing him. The gunfire continued for several tense moments before falling silent. Zion looked back towards the front of the house, confused about why the gunman had stopped firing. Enough time had passed for him to reload, yet no more shots were coming his way. "You're welcome, Zion," Calvin's voice came through the communicator. Zion cracked a smile as he pulled himself up off the ground. "Good to see you're still kicking, Calvin. Where the hell are you?" "I made it into the house where the tree is," Calvin replied. "Do you see Jinx?" Zion asked. "I don't, but I see that horde coming our way from the rear," Calvin answered. "You cover the front and keep an eye out for Jinx. I'll take care of our guests," Zion instructed. "There's 50 of them," Calvin warned. "Good, I could use a workout," Zion responded. Zion walked towards the back of the house while loading more shells into his shotgun. He stopped at the back window, staring out into the field and spotting the dozens of spread-out ghouls shambling their way. "Let's clean them up," Zion muttered. Zion stepped out the back door and was immediately startled by Birch, who raised his gun at him. "Damn, man, you gonna give me a heart attack," Zion exclaimed. "Where's Jinx?" Birch asked urgently. Before Zion could answer, several gunshots went off at the house a couple of doors down. "I'll handle these things." "You go help him," Zion said. Birch nodded and rushed off towards the house as Zion cracked his neck. "Let's start clearing these things out," he muttered to himself. Zion casually strolled into the field, honing in on his first victim, a tall, badly decomposing creature that was having trouble navigating the field. Rather than fire his weapon, Zion flipped the shotgun over, using the butt of the rifle to cave in the head of the creature in a single blow. As it fell, 2 more creatures lined up to attack Zion, who casually aimed his weapon and fired. The shotgun shell ripped through both of the zombies' heads, dropping them to the ground. Zion stood tall, chambering in another round before yelling out, "Yeah, come and get some. I have enough for everybody." Chapter 11. A few moments earlier, Jinx had made his way to the back of the house, bursting outside with his gun raised high. He glanced out into the field behind the house, spotting a number of zombies shambling in their direction. "It's always something else to deal with," he muttered to himself. Jinx turned and began moving quickly up the row of houses, knowing that there were likely gunmen coming his way. As he passed the back door of the first house, he was startled when a zombie smacked up against the glass. He aimed his gun towards the ghoul, who was flailing helplessly against the glass, but quickly snapped back to the moment and continued to the next house. "Please tell me we cleared this one," he said to himself. Jinx got to the back door, peeking inside and seeing that it was clear. He turned the knob and quietly got inside, shutting it behind him before moving towards the front of the house. As he approached the front door, he spotted a chemical trap above the door that only needed to be armed. Jinx rushed towards the line on the wall. However, as he got close, he spotted movement outside. 3 men were moving swiftly across the front yard, 2 of them already past the window. Without thinking, Jinx raised his weapon and fired towards the last man in the formation. The bullets ripped through the window, striking the man in the side and sending him to the ground. A split second later, gunfire erupted from outside, splintering wood and shattering glass. Jinx dove back into the kitchen, crawling on the floor as the assault continued unabated. As he got to the kitchen, he heard the front door being kicked in, prompting him to roll over and send a barrage of bullets towards it. Despite his best efforts, his aim was off, the bullets slamming into the wall and frame of the door. However, the threat of being shot was enough to force the attacking gunman back behind cover, giving Jinx enough time to crawl into the kitchen and around the wall. Jinx quickly popped out his magazine, loading in a fresh one as he heard 2 sets of footsteps coming from the front room. He knew that if he stuck his head out from cover, it was likely to be shot off, so instead, he thrust his weapon around the corner and began firing wildly. He wasn't sure if he hit the target, but he knew his cover was blown as bullets began ripping through the wall. Jinx stayed low as he crawled through the kitchen. the enemy fire sending drywall and wood splinters flying through the air as multiple gunmen fired towards him. It took a moment of crawling for him to reach the corner of the kitchen. He ducked behind a small island in the middle of the room, aiming out from behind cover. Jinx reached up for his communicator to call out for help, but before he could speak, one of the gunmen stepped into the kitchen and unleashed a torrent of bullets in his direction. Jinx darted around to the other side of the island, sliding on the floor and aiming his weapon towards the kitchen doorway. As soon as he was clear of the island, he pulled the trigger as quickly as he could, sending a handful of rounds towards the door and forcing the gunman back behind cover. Jinx continued to lie there, gun aimed at the doorway and the majority of his body protected by the kitchen island. A tense silence followed for several seconds, where nobody fired or made a move. "You know, you can just go back the way you came and we can call it good," Jinx called out. "Yeah, we could. But where's the fun in that?" The gunman responded. "You and I have very different definitions of the word fun," Jinx retorted. "What can I say? I like what I like, and I'm unapologetic about it," the gunman said with a chuckle. "Fair enough. But just so you know, while it's not at the top of my list of fun things to do, I get the feeling that popping you in the face would bring me some joy," Jinx replied. "You're assuming you'd get the chance to. What's to stop me from just tossing in a grenade and calling it a day?" the gunman asked. "Well, we both know that it would be a dick move for starters. Do you really want that kind of reputation?" Jinx questioned. The gunman chuckled again. "As far as anybody will know, you're the one who pulled the pin. I was just quick on the draw. Hell, I might even throw in a little flair, like I shot the grenade and set it off in your hand." "Well, there goes my hope of talking my way out of this situation," Jinx said with a sigh. "What makes you say that?" the gunman asked. "Because anybody who is stupid enough to think shooting a grenade sets it off clearly isn't going to be able to negotiate in good faith," Jinx explained. "Enjoy your express elevator to hell, my man," the gunman said. Jinx focused intently towards the door of the kitchen, ready to pull the trigger as soon as he saw so much as a hand. However, before he got the opportunity, 4 gunshots went off from the front room in rapid succession. There were 2 sets of 2 shots, like someone was double tapping the gunman. As soon as the gunshots ended, Jinx heard 2 bodies fall to the ground. He looked towards the kitchen door, seeing a bloody hand holding a grenade in it. Jinx held his breath until he saw that the explosive device still had the pin in it. He let out a sigh of relief as he began to relax. "Birch, is that you?" Jinx called out. "I'm afraid not, Jinx," a familiar voice responded. Jinx's tension snapped back to full as he aimed his rifle back towards the kitchen door. "Lucas, what in the hell are you doing?" Jinx continued to aim as Lucas stuck his empty hands in through the door. "I'm unarmed and I'm going to come in now. Given how I just saved your life, I would appreciate it if you would refrain from putting a bullet in me," Lucas said calmly. "Just move slow and keep those hands where I can see them," Jinx ordered. Jinx pulled himself up off the ground while keeping his assault rifle trained on Lucas, who slowly stepped into the kitchen. His hands were raised high, and he spun around slowly so that Jinx could get a good look at him. "My handgun is holstered, and I have no intention of drawing it again," Lucas assured him. Jinx gave him a once-over before motioning for him to lower his hands. "Just don't make any sudden moves." Lucas nodded as he folded his arms and leaned up against the wall. "Now, what in the hell is going on? Are these guys not with you?" Jinx demanded. "In the loosest possible sense, yes, they are with me," Lucas replied. "I'm going to need a little more than that," Jinx said, narrowing his eyes. "These men are, or were, militia. Some are military. However, most are not. They're not from Bend. Rather, they're from Mondras, a small town to the north," Lucas explained. "If they're with you, then why in the hell did you shoot them? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm thankful that you did." "I'm just confused," Jinx said. "Do you fully agree with everything your side does?" Lucas asked. "What do you mean?" Jinx replied, puzzled. "I mean, do you agree with every decision your side makes? Are you a true believer? Do you agree with every order that is handed down from above?" Lucas clarified. I can't say that I do. There are a lot of things I would have done differently if I had been in charge, Jinx admitted. I'm glad to hear you say that, Jinx, because I am the same way. My people have done a lot of good since the apocalypse began, saved a lot of lives and really made a difference when there was nobody else who could. However, some of the people in charge see the world very differently than I do, Lucas explained. Jinx motioned towards the dead man lying in the kitchen doorway. And I'm guessing that they're a part of the decisions that you don't exactly approve of. They are indeed, Lucas confirmed. Who are they? Jinx asked. They are one of several kill teams that the higher-ups have decided to set loose on the region, Lucas replied. Kill teams? Jinx echoed in disbelief. I'm afraid so. A handful of ex-military true believers managed to convince someone high up that it was time to wage full war on the military. Rather than endanger trained men for what would essentially be risky missions, the order was given to clear out the prison in Mondras and set them loose, Lucas explained. Jesus. That sounds like a powder keg just waiting to go off, Jinx said, shaking his head. And it already has, several times. I've heard rumors of these teams running wild on civilians, people who just wish to be left alone. Even with those reports, the higher-ups decided they were doing more good than harm, so they let it slide, Lucas said. So how did they find us? Jinx asked. Before Lucas could answer, there was a light tapping sound at the door. Birch stood there, his rifle pointed directly at Lucas, who didn't move. I believe we have company, Lucas said. Jinx tossed his weapon down onto the kitchen island before walking over to the door and opening it up. Put your gun down and come in. Everything's fine, Jinx said. Birch was confused but did as instructed. As he entered the house, Jinx looked out and saw Zion cracking zombie skulls in the field. He seems to be having fun, Jinx remarked. As Jinx shut the door, he clicked on his communicator. We're clear, everybody. Lucas is on site and with me. He is not to be shot at. Repeat, he is not to be shot at. You mind filling me in here, Jinx? Birch asked. Bad guys are dead on the floor. Lucas saved my life. And now we're chatting, Jinx summarized. Fair enough, Birch said. So, Lucas, you were saying how they found us. Jinx prompted. I don't know exactly. They have the same radios we do, so it's possible they have been monitoring our chats today, Lucas speculated. And if that's the case, then saving my skin wasn't the only reason for you to take them out. If word got back about you negotiating with us, Jinx said, trailing off. What can I say? Self-preservation is a powerful motivator, Lucas admitted. So what now? Jinx asked. You give me my vehicle so I can go save my men, and then we call it a day, Lucas said. It's parked right out back and ready to go, Jinx replied. I do appreciate it, Jinx, Lucas said. There's one more thing, though, Jinx said. Lucas watched as Jinx walked over to the refrigerator, which had a magnetic notepad on it. He yanked it down and began writing a series of numbers on it before handing the paper over to Lucas. When you get back to Bend, I want you to find a radio. I will be at that frequency every night at midnight for 1 hour, Jinx instructed. While it may appear as though I am against my people, I assure you that I am not. I will not betray them, Lucas said firmly. Nobody's asking you to. But if they're sending out kill squads with no supervision, these skirmishes could turn into a full-blown war if we're not careful. Having some back-channel communications might not be the worst card to have up our sleeve. Jinx reasoned. Lucas thought about it for a moment before nodding. He then extended his hand for a shake, which Jinx happily accepted. It's been a pleasure, Jinx. Be safe out there, Lucas said. You as well, Lucas, Jinx replied. Lucas nodded to Birch before exiting and heading back to the APC. As he fired it up and drove off, Jinx and Birch stood in the doorway of the house, looking out to Zion, who was mopping up the last of the zombies. Well, that was an unexpected development, Birch said. But a welcome one, Jinx replied. So now what? Birch asked. We get packed up and head home. Chapter 12. The next day, Jinx and Zion stood on a dock by the river. In front of them, a couple of boats were anchored just offshore, with several drone pilots sitting on the deck. All of them were intently focused on their job of flying the heavy-duty drones back and forth from the gun store, dropping off the ammunition bags that Jinx and Zion had packed up. Both men watched as one of the drones flew in and began hovering over a small spot in the field next to them. As it got within a few feet of the ground, it released the payload, dropping the 50-pound bag of bullets, which was quickly collected by a soldier and brought over to the pile. "I think we did some fine work, if I do say so myself," Jinx said. Zion nodded. "Got the bounty, survived relatively unscathed, and cracked more than our fair share of skulls. You're right, we did do some fine work today." The duo exchanged a fist bump as they continued to watch the fruits of their labor fly in from town. While they watched, Corporal Parker walked over to them in a friendly manner, like he was about to catch up with old friends. "They told me that I could find you here," Corporal Parker said. "Corporal Parker?" Jinx responded. "That's me. You must be Jinx." "I am. This is my good friend Zion." Parker extended his hand for a shake, which Zion reciprocated. "It's good to finally meet you in person." "Likewise. How are you and your crew holding up?" Jinx asked. "Private Simmons is okay, getting patched up by a proper doctor. His hand hurts, but I think he's excited about having some time off to recuperate. And Dave, well," Parker trailed off as he pointed to Dave, who was standing on the bow of a boat with a big grin on his face as he piloted a drone. "He looks like he's having fun," Jinx observed. "For most of us, zombies roaming the earth was the worst thing to ever happen. To Dave, I think it was the best. All that man wants to do is fly a drone, and now he gets to do it," Parker explained. "Ain't nothing wrong with a man following his dreams. Like this crazy son of a bitch over here," Zion said, smacking Jinx on the arm. Jinx gave a reluctant nod and shrugged. "I'm a pyro who loves explosives. It's not my fault that it's suddenly an in-demand skill set." "You're damn good at it, and thankfully you're damn good at negotiations. If you hadn't pulled out some magic, I don't think I'd be here right now," Parker acknowledged. "That was more luck than anything. If Lucas hadn't been a willing negotiation partner, that could have gone south," Jinx admitted. "Regardless, I'm very thankful for what you did. I won't forget it," Parker said, nodding to Jinx. Their conversation was interrupted by someone yelling from a distance. "Corporal Parker, your ride is about to leave." Sergeant Cooper shouted. "I'll see you guys around," Parker said, hustling off to catch his ride back to Seattle, hopping into the back of a large transport truck filled with ammunition. "Come on, let's find out about our cut. Get it loaded up and hit the road," Jinx suggested. "Sounds good to me. I'm ready to sleep in my own bed for a change," Zion agreed. The two of them walked over towards Sergeant Cooper, who was waving in another transport truck so that it could be loaded. "Excuse me, Sergeant, is this one for us?" Jinx asked. "Corporal Jinx, just the man I've been looking for. And you must be one of his civilian friends," Sergeant Cooper responded. "The name's Zion," Zion introduced himself. "Good for you. Corporal Jinx, I regret to inform you that my orders are to take all of the ammunition back to Seattle for disbursement," Sergeant Cooper stated. "And I regret to inform you that someone's going to have to carry your broken-legged ass back to Seattle if you don't give us what we earned," Zion threatened. Sergeant Cooper recoiled due to the threat, but Jinx stepped in between them, preventing an escalation. "I think what my friend here is saying, just give us our cut and we'll be on our way." "I'm sorry, Corporal, but I have my orders," Sergeant Cooper insisted. "I'm sure you do. If you'll just contact Captain Odom, he'll be able to." Jinx started, but Cooper raised his hand, interrupting him. "This order came straight from General Stevens," Cooper said. Jinx was ready to continue his argument, but the mere mention of General Stevens caused him to stop. "All right, Sergeant, you have yourself a good day." "For what it's worth, Corporal, I think it's bullshit too," Cooper added. "I appreciate that, Sergeant," Jinx replied. Even though his job was right there at the back of the truck, Sergeant Cooper slinked away just to put some distance between himself and Zion, who was clearly fuming. "You know there's going to be consequences for this, right?" Zion asked. "Yep. Come on. We got to get back so we can rip this Band-Aid off," Jinx said. Zion and Jinx marched off towards their vehicle. Zion stayed silent, the rage bubbling just beneath the surface, while Jinx engaged in some calming breathing exercises, hoping that Zion would subconsciously join in because he knew the fuse on a powder keg had just been lit. A few hours later, Jinx drove their SUV straight up to City Hall, and before he was close to stopping, Zion had already bounded out of the car. Jinx slammed on the brake and threw it into park, sending Calvin and Birch lurching forward. "Calvin, get Birch to the doctor," Jinx ordered. "What are you going to do?" Birch asked. "Try and stop Zion from sending more people to the doctor," Jinx replied. Jinx ran after Zion, who was at the front door of City Hall, with so much rage etched onto his features that the guards simply stepped aside. As Jinx got up to the guards, he barked an order out to them. "Nobody else comes in unless I say so," Jinx commanded. The two guards nodded as Jinx ran down the hallway, trying to catch up with Zion, who was already at the conference room door. "Zion, wait," Jinx pleaded. The plea fell on deaf ears as Zion shoved the door open with so much force that the glass cracked when it slammed against the back wall. The sudden violent action caused Sergeant Dickerson and Captain Odom to jump out of their chairs and back up against the wall, terrified of the raging beast standing before them. "It was out of my hands. It was out of my hands," Captain Odom exclaimed. "Well, if your hands are that useless, maybe you don't need them anymore," Zion threatened, taking a step towards the captain before Jinx got there. He darted in front of the big fella, getting him to stop before he did something that couldn't be taken back. "Everybody settle the fuck down. Now we're going to settle this like adults," Jinx commanded. "What if you don't like the outcome?" Sergeant Dickerson asked. "Then I don't think it matters what I say, because Zion here is going to settle it by playground rules," Jinx replied. "And not one of your candy-ass rich person gated community playgrounds neither. It's going to be an inner city, rusted out slide with junky needles waiting in the sand below kind of playground," Zion added. Jinx motioned up to Zion, giving the sergeant and captain a nod to make sure they understood what the stakes were. Both of them nodded and took their seats, giving things a moment to calm down before talking. As everyone took their seat, Jinx let out a sigh of relief that no blood had been spilled or bones broken, but he knew that could happen at the drop of a hat. "Captain Odom, why don't you start out, and please explain in very, very apologetic terms why we got screwed," Jinx said. "When I agreed to the deal with you for the ammo, I checked it out with Clint and Corporal Gadd, who are the right-hand men for General Stevens. They weren't pleased with it, but they agreed nonetheless. Something changed this morning, and I don't know what," Captain Odom explained. "You're going to have to do better than that, Captain," Zion demanded. "I don't know what to tell you, Zion. I thought the deal was in place, but the rug was pulled out from under me too. I'm sure you can smell the faint hint of piss lingering in the air, which should tell you that I'm the last person that would do something to get on your bad side." "Just that door slamming open was enough to put me on edge," Captain Odom admitted. Zion stared down the captain for a few seconds before sniffing a few times. The pungent smell invaded his nostrils, prompting him to crack a smile and nod at the captain, putting the terrified man at ease for the moment. "Captain, I'm going to be blunt with you. This needs to get resolved," Jinx stated. "It is resolved, Corporal. Now you're a soldier, and the order has come down, so I expect you to understand that," Captain Odom said. "Well, I'm not a soldier, so I don't understand. Why don't you explain it to me?" Zion interjected. "This conflict has multiple fronts, and with the leaks, nobody outside of those at the top has the full picture. They estimated you got just shy of 100,000 rounds from that gun store, and I've been assured they're being put to good use," Captain Odom explained. "We're also on the front lines down here, Captain. So what's our cut?" Jinx asked. "They're sending 500 rounds," Captain Odom replied. Zion scoffed as he smacked the table in frustration, while Jinx just sat there, staring off into the distance as if he was deep in thought. There was some indiscriminate screaming and name-calling coming from Zion, which Jinx completely blocked out. After several moments of this, Jinx stood up from the table, prompting confusion on the part of everyone else. "Corporal, where are you going?" Captain Odom asked. "I'm going to go inform the rest of my team," Jinx replied. "Inform them of what?" Sergeant Dickerson inquired. "That I'm resigning from the military, and that I suggest they do the same," Jinx stated. Jinx didn't look anybody in the eye as he walked towards the door, both the sergeant and captain beginning to panic as they realized he wasn't bluffing. "Jinx, wait please," Sergeant Dickerson pleaded. "I'm sorry, Jinx, but it's out of my hands," Captain Odom reiterated. Jinx stopped at the door, pausing for dramatic effect before turning around and speaking with a raised, yet controlled voice. "Then you better get it into your hands. Because 500 rounds is nothing compared to what we're dealing with to the south. That is a full-blown army down there, and after the hornet's nest we kicked up over the last couple of days, I fully expect there to be blowback. Now, if you're not going to arm my team properly so that we can defend ourselves, we're going to do the only thing we can, which is surrender." "You've killed their men. Do you really think they'll accept your surrender?" Sergeant Dickerson asked. "I have no illusions about what they're going to do to me," Jinx replied. "But if it prevents an all-out assault on this town, then so be it. Now I'm going to go check on Birch and see how that bullet wound is doing. And when I come back, you better have some good news for me," Jinx warned. "Or else your ass is going to be packing some bags real quick. Because y'all won't be staying around here for very long," Zion added. Zion got up and exited the room with Jinx, leaving the sergeant and captain to figure out a way to deal with the situation. Chapter 13. Jinx strolled out of City Hall, holding his head high as Zion jogged to catch up to him. As they reached the street, Zion finally spoke up. "That was a ballsy move back there," Zion said. "Something's got to give, especially if there are felon kill teams roaming the countryside," Jinx replied. "There's going to be blowback to taking that team out, and I get the sense that Lucas might put the blame on us." Zion nodded. "To be fair, we did kill the majority of them." "Yeah, that's true," Jinx admitted. "So do you think it's going to work?" Zion asked. "We should be able to get something out of it," Jinx said. "It better be all of it, or else there's—" Zion began, but Jinx interrupted him, catching the big fella off guard since it was something he rarely did. "If it's a reasonable offer, we're going to take it," Jinx asserted. "Really? After all we went through, you're okay with them not living up to the deal?" Zion questioned. "Yeah, I know. I'm pissed about it, but going to Bend is a bluff. And even if it wasn't, I'm not sure I'd want to go down there. We have problems on our side, but at least we're not sending out kill teams comprised of violent felons and unstable ex-military," Jinx explained. Zion contemplated for a moment before ultimately nodding in agreement. "I trust you, man." "Good. Now let's go get a cup of coffee and make them sweat for a little while," Jinx suggested. Zion let out a laugh as the two of them walked across the street towards the cafe to indulge themselves. Half an hour later, the duo strolled back across the street towards City Hall, where the two guards quickly let them in. Jinx noticed the expression on their faces, a mixture of fear and concern. "Looks like word spreads fast around here," Jinx remarked. The two men walked back into the conference room, where Captain Odom was talking into a satellite phone. When he spotted the duo, Odom gave them half a smile and a thumbs up before waving them in. "That looks promising," Jinx noted. "Thank you, Gad. I really appreciate it," Captain Odom said as he hung up the phone, tossing it onto the table with a little flair, clearly happy about the discussion. "Good news, I take it?" Jinx asked. "Damn well better be," Zion added. That was Corporal Gad, and he. Captain Odom began, but Jinx interrupted with vitriol. "The same Corporal Gad who made you promises that he didn't keep," Jinx snapped. Odom took a deep breath, holding his hands up, hoping to calm Jinx down. I know, but he was in the room with General Stevens, who confirmed everything." "So what are we getting?" Zion asked. A lot of the ammunition has been allocated to some hot spots that have sprung up. And before you ask, I don't know where. They didn't say. And if I had asked, they still wouldn't have said because of the leaks, Captain Odom explained. You didn't answer the man's question. What are we getting? Jinx pressed. I was able to get you 10,000 rounds of ammunition. About 2/3 of it rifle, with the rest a mix of shotgun and handgun, Captain Odom said. Jinx looked over to Zion, the two of them having a silent debate, questioning if it was enough. After a few moments of contemplation, Zion spoke up. That's half of what we agreed to. I think we're entitled to a little something extra to make up the difference, Zion suggested. That's going to depend on what you want. As long as it's not bullets, I might be able to pull some strings, Captain Odom offered. What do you think, Jinx? Anything in particular you want? Zion asked. Some quality of life items might be nice, Jinx replied. Yeah, I heard y'all have power up there in Seattle, Zion said. It's a little spotty at times, but yeah, the lights are on most of the time, Captain Odom confirmed. Good, then they should be able to spare some solar generators for the town here, Jinx suggested. And some entertainment to go along with that power. Some movies, music, video games, Zion added. And some big-ass televisions to watch it all on, Jinx said. That all sounds doable. Is there anything else? Captain Odom asked. Yeah, liquor, and lots of it, Zion stated. That's going to be a tall order. It's in high demand, but I'll see what I can do, Captain Odom promised. If you can't manage to get your hands on some bottles, some distilling equipment will be just fine, Jinx said. Both Odom and Zion looked at Jinx with confused expressions. I know a guy with a killer moonshine recipe, Jinx explained. Okay, I'll make the call and it'll be delivered in the next 48 hours, Captain Odom assured. Now we're talking, Zion said, extending his fist for a bump with Jinx, who happily reciprocated. And now that we have that out of the way. Zion, would you mind giving us the room? Captain Odom asked. Zion looked over to Jinx with concern. Are you good, brother? Yeah, I'm all right. Go grab us a table at the cafe. I'll be there in a minute, Jinx said. Zion nodded as he got up from the table and left the room, leaving the three soldiers to themselves. If you're going to read me the riot act, let's just pretend that you did and call it a day, Jinx said. It's not that. Someone would like a word with you, Captain Odom replied. Odom dialed up the satellite phone again, immediately putting it onto a speaker device set up on the table. A moment later, a man's voice came over the speaker. This is Clint, the voice said. Clint, this is Captain Odom down here in White Salmon. I have Corporal Jinx on the line as you requested, Captain Odom said. Thank you, Captain. Corporal, before we start, please accept my heartfelt apology about the ammunition. The situation on the ground has changed dramatically in the last 48 hours, and the matter was removed from my hands. However, I understand a counter-offer has been made, Clint said. And we accepted with some non-bullet related additions, Jinx confirmed. Wonderful. Now, what I'm about to tell you does not leave this room. Not to your squad. Not even to Zion. Is that clear? Clint asked. I'm listening, Jinx replied. I heard that you had a run-in with one of their kill squads, Clint stated. We did. Thanks for the heads up those exist, by the way, Jinx said. I'm glad you made it out okay, and my apologies, I honestly had no idea they were operating that close to Bend, Clint continued. Well, they were. But this one isn't going to be doing any more damage, Jinx assured. That's good to hear, Clint said. So what's on your mind, Clint? I'm assuming it's not just to congratulate me on taking out a team of killers I wasn't warned about, Jinx questioned. No, Jinx, it is not. As I'm sure you know, we have a mole within our ranks, Clint revealed. Yeah, I kind of gathered that when the militia showed up and started taking shots at us, Jinx responded. Look, I'm going to level with you. The ammunition you got for us is going to help, but we're still severely outgunned. I'm pretty sure we have the manpower over them, but it doesn't do a lot of good if we don't have the weapons for them to use, Clint explained. How can I help? Jinx asked. I've been tasked by General Stevens to root out the mole by any means necessary, and I want your help to do it, Clint requested. Go on, Jinx encouraged. Over the next few days, I'm going to be giving bogus reports to people I suspect. I'm going to need you to, well, I don't really have a polite way of saying it. I'm going to need you to be the bait, Clint explained. Of course you do, Jinx replied dryly. You seem to have the trust of everyone around you, and quite frankly your threat to walk in order to protect the civilians proved it to me, Clint said. If I agree to help you, you and I are the only ones who know what the plans are. I speak to you and only you directly, everybody else is cut out of the loop. Even Odom and Dickerson, Jinx stipulated. I agree. And for the record, gentlemen, I don't suspect you, but we're not taking any chances, Clint said. So when do we start? Jinx asked. I'm having my first dummy order going out tomorrow morning. I'll contact you this evening to go over the details, Clint explained. I'll be ready and waiting, Jinx assured. Thank you, Corporal. Captain, will you take me off speaker? I need to talk to you for a moment, Clint requested. Of course, Clint, Captain Odom said. As Odom picked up the receiver, Jinx got up from the table to leave. Sergeant Dickerson followed him out of the room, stopping him in the hallway. You certainly have a set on you, don't you, Jinx? Sergeant Dickerson remarked. Just standing up for what I believe in, Dickerson. Just standing up for what I believe in, Jinx replied. The sergeant nodded at Jinx as the corporal turned and walked down the hallway. The last few days had been draining, but from the sounds of things, Jinx knew it was only going to get tougher and more dangerous from here on out. The end.